This is the Houndsman XP Podcast.
Good dog, get that bear. Get that bear in
The
here.
original podcast for the complete Houndsman.
Look at your coat of go, Justin Hyde. We're gonna get him. We're gonna get him.
The podcast that represents our lifestyle of extreme performance.
Get up there. Get him. Get him. Yeah, good boy. Good boy, Ranger.
Uniting houndsmen across the globe, from east to west, north to south.
You know, if you're going to catch a cat or a lion, you know, you have to have teamwork.
We take you to the wildest places on earth.
Yeah, so how many days a week you spend out there?
As much as I can, to be honest with you. Anytime that I get, I'm out there.
Join us for every heart-pounding adventure on Houndsman XP.
I'll tell you like I tell everyone else, I'm going to hunt whether you're here or not, so you might as well be here.
Welcome to the Houndsman XP Podcast. This week we're going to have a repeat guest. Raymond Plummer is back on the podcast. This episode was recorded on our YouTube channel, and I've stripped the audio out of it and put it in podcast form. But you'll remember Raymond from our podcast a couple of years ago at Uncle Earl's called The Dogmen, where Ed Barnes and Raymond Plummer and I all sat down together and had a good time at Uncle Earl's Hog Base. This was originally recorded for YouTube, and you can find us on YouTube by searching Houndsman XP Podcast, and you can tune in every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock for Raw Dog with Ed Barnes and I. We have a great time, the best dog talk going on a weeknight in the country. And on Sunday nights, you can tune in at 8 o'clock on our YouTube channel for the Shorty Gorham Show. So we're doing a lot of stuff. We're recording a lot of stuff and trying to get a lot of good material out there for you. One thing I want to bring to your attention real quick is we've been recycling some of our old episodes. I get a lot of questions about this. People want to know where the old episodes are. They're all on our YouTube channel, and we're slowly re-releasing onto this podcast platform. That's why you've been hearing people like Steve Fielder back on the podcast and some of Heath Hyatt's stuff and Josh Michaelis. That was all previous stuff, and when we switched the channel over, started our own network, then we pulled all of that stuff, and now we're just trickling it back out to you. So there's a lot of good stuff that's happening, and we're releasing that usually on Thursdays and Fridays and Wednesdays and pretty much whenever we feel like it. But this is brand new stuff, and you can watch it all live when it happens on our YouTube channel. You just got to pay attention to when we release it on our Facebook pages and tune in. It's interactive. You can ask questions. You can make comments. We have a really good time. Highly encourage you to join us on YouTube on Tuesday nights at 8 for Raw Dog or Sunday night at 8 for the Shorty Gorham Show. It's a good time. Like always, this show is brought to you by OnX. OnX Hunt. You can go to our website, click on the link, go right to OnX. If you're not using OnX, I highly encourage you to do that. It's so easy for me to bring up information right from their app. It's loaded on my phone. I can be driving down the road, see a woods, and wonder, man, that looks like a great place to hunt. I wonder who owns that. And I can mark it, find out the landowner, get information for their contacts, all kinds of stuff within their app there. When I'm in the backcountry and hunting public land in strange places, there's features inside the app that allow me to track my actual trail, where I walk, where I drive. It goes right on to the map, and I can save that and use it like breadcrumbs or an actual trail. It's easy, man. I can document sign. I can mark places that I'm seeing lion scratches or bear sign or trails or kills. You can do that all within the app. Super handy and it's super easy to use onX. And when you use it with your Garmin, man, it's like tracking on steroids at that point. You can really figure some stuff out. So I highly encourage you to go to houndsmanxp.com and check out onX on our sponsor page. And if you order the Elite promo or the Elite package, enter the promo code HXP20 and you will get 20% off of your subscription. One last thing before we get into this great conversation with Raymond Plummer and his Catahoula dogs. We are closing in on Election Day. I read a thing the other day where the NRA and some of the outdoor industry, maybe the NSSF, estimates that there are approximately 10 million gun owners and hunters that are not registered to vote. That's alarming. That's alarming. I can't tell you how troubling that is for me to hear. We've got such a powerful voice, and I hope that you are registered to vote and will vote in the next election. That's why we've been redistributing some of this stuff, is because of this upcoming election. I've doubled down on Colorado 127. I've been in meetings with the members from the leadership from UHC and some of the groups that are involved there. We've got a great effort that we're putting together to defeat Proposition 127. Check out CRWM, Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management. All of you can share all of that high quality media that's being built to educate the public on why we need to vote no on Proposition 127 in Colorado. Even if you don't live in Colorado, our social media networks have closed our world in. It's brought us all closer together. Your posts will reach people in Colorado. So you can go to our website or our social media pages, click our link tree, watch our Instagram, watch our Facebook. You can see a lot of the things that we're sharing and encouraging people and educating the public on why they should vote no on Colorado Proposition 127 that will ban lion and bobcat hunting in the state of Colorado. We have a lot of friends there that have got it all on the line, and they need our help. So, without any further delay, let's get into this podcast with Raymond Plummer, Ed Barnes, and I. It's a long one. It's a good one. You're going to enjoy it.
You want me to kick it off? Okay.
Heck yeah. This is your show. We're just here.
Okay. We're live. Kind of feel like I'm in a bit of a snake's den. I'm here with two ex-game wardens. So
And two Marines.
And ex-Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Semper Fi.
I haven't wore the shirt for you tonight.
I wasn't a Marine, but
Marine Corps.
What does it say?
It says birthplace of the Marine Corps, Ton Tavern, Philadelphia.
Was that the birthplace?
Mm-hmm. 1775. My Marine Corps came alive.
I've never been a game warden. I've never been in the Marines, but I was raised by a Marine. But he was definitely not a game warden.
He taught you all the things that not to be.
He was on the opposite end of that. But yeah, so what do y'all want to talk about? We literally have no game plan.
Well, you need to introduce our guest.
Everybody knows him. We got Raymond Plummer down here, famed Catahoula man, owner of the famous Blue Dog.
Come on now, Blue Boy.
Blue Boy.
Get it right.
Blue Boy. I had blue right. The best Catahoulas have always been blue.
Sure.
I had a blue one that was a top in my book. Not one of the. Still probably the top dog I've ever had was a blue Catahoula.
Oh, awesome.
I had a blue Catahoula one time.
Yeah, and I had a Floodhound one time.
See, there you go. You have one
guys have
plot,
something.
I have one. Yeah.
You guys have something going on. I should just like leave and let y'all get at it.
Everybody ought to own at least one plot in their life. I'll say that.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I've had a few plots. One that I kind of liked.
One that you what?
One that I kind of liked.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I had a blue Catahoula. His name was Rebel, and he was the second dog I ever got.
Now you didn't get him from Uncle Tom, did you?
No. He just came off some cow dogs out of west of Tulsa. I think it was Sky Took. Got him from a cowboy who just used them on cows. And yeah, he was probably the best dog I've ever had. I cussed him the whole time, but now that I look back, he was a good one.
Right.
You could just jam his nose. Like, he had a bit of a lazy streak, and that's where me and him kind of bumped heads a lot. But if you found a semi-fresh hog track, I could just take him by the collar and stick his nose down in that track, and when he got a whiff of it, he would trail to match any hound I've seen since then. If he got it in his nose, he was going to bay that pig.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that sounds like a good one, Ed. The on my dogs, like I've told you guys before, we do hog hunt. Primarily, that's our big thing. But we do work we catch wild cows for people, and of course, we tree. I like a dog that'll look up. And we've talked about that before. But I had a gentleman come. He used to camp out on my place and turkey hunt every spring. And he come walking in one day and he dry as a cracker. And a lot of people didn't know how to deal with him because his happy face was his sad face was his mad face. It was all the same. And he come walking through the door there one day and he looks at me just for an off, and I knew how to play him and I just loved him to pieces and he loved me. But I told him, he said, he stood there a long time, just didn't say nothing. And I said, "You shoot a turkey?" And he stands there and looks at me a little bit and he says, "Maybe." And I said, "You kill a turkey?" And he said, "Maybe." And he stands there a little while and I don't say nothing else. He says, "You got a dog that'll track a turkey?" And I stood there and stared at him a little bit and I said, "Maybe." So we took, of course, it's going to be which dog it is. I took that old blue boy dog out there, put him on a string, and I just always take my fingers and cast it on the sign where I want him to check. And I left him on the lead. And brother, he took us up the mountain and threw about 125 yards of blackberry briars on top. And old Harold was hung up in the briars behind me. And we popped out the other side, and that bird, he had shot him and broke his wing. And his wing was laid down, was the reason he was running on the ground. And that dog pointed that bird just like a bird dog now. And old Harold was hung up in the briars, and he says, "Shoot that turkey." And I said, "He's your bird, you shoot him." And I just reached down and unleashed the dog. Well, that dog landed on that bird and went to pulling feathers, and he's screaming, "Get that dog off that bird!" but they'll track about what you put them on for sure. They know that's what you want them to do.
Yeah, I had one of my great uncles. My great grandpa and at least one of my great uncles. They had Catahoulas going back to the 30s. So one of my great uncles, Tom. I'd seen pictures of his dogs, and I kind of had an inkling that they were Catahoula. It was later on in his life when I was at his house and I was talking to him. And I said, "Well, he was showing me pictures." I said, "What is that dog?" He said, "That's just a stock dog." I said, "Looks like a cur dog." He bowed up at me. He was in his mid-80s. He bowed up and he said, "Son, that was not a cur." Because they had a different definition of what a cur was.
Yeah.
And so I started rattling off all the, Catahoulas got a million names. So I started rattling them off, see if one of them might
stick.
Stick. Really didn't. And I was like, "Man, I'm pretty sure that's Catahoula." He said, "No." He said, "That's just an old stock dog, son." And then he started telling me the story about where he got him, and he didn't remember names, but I'm about 99% sure he bought him. You know, Mr. Stodgill?
Oh yeah, Tom used to call me. I used to call Tom. He was a good friend of mine.
And I'm pretty sure he got that dog from Stodgill when he would travel through. And I spoke with him, when he was on up in years. And
What are some of the different names for Catahoula?
You go, Raymond. You probably know more than I do, but I mean, they've probably got 10.
Hey, when I was growing up, before the days of registries, they called them leopard curs, and there is a leopard cur. They started registering them in the 50s. They changed, I think it was in the 80s. I'd have to look back, but I think it was in the 80s. They changed the leopard cur name to leopard hound because they had bred a lot of the tree out of them. But the leopard cur is one of them. A lot of people call them leopard hounds. A lot of people call them leopard bulldogs or Catahoula bulldogs or Catahoula hounds. I mean, they come with a lot of different names, And then
Louisiana
in Florida,
curs.
they call them cracker curs in Florida,
Yeah, I think that's a little bit different. I mean, it's got a Catahoula influence.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like this. It's if you look at the American foxhound, for instance, they were the first breed in the United States that was registered as a purebred dog. And if you watch the Westminster Dog Show, you'll see a foxhound nearly every year makes it into the final part of that. I kind of like to watch it, But here's the deal about a foxhound, and this is what people with the cur dogs miss. Okay, they miss it big time. The difference in the foxhounds is this: you could have like a walker hound, running walker or treeing walker, whichever. But they were started by the Walker brothers. Okay, the Goodman hound, same thing. Trig. Okay, a lot of those dogs, whether they were a July or whatever, were named after the guy, the bloodline man that bred them. Okay,
the plot. And
if you read the history of the American foxhound, it gives, it'll go through a list, and I've got the old book, the original book on the American foxhound, and it talks about the different strains within the breed. Okay, so that dog that goes Westminster could be a July, he could be a Goodman, he could be a Walker. They're all foxhounds, just a different strain. It's the same thing with those cracker curs in Florida. Okay.
Yeah, it's just a strain out of
they're a different
got a main
strain.
category, and then
right, and they've been bred a different, maybe a little different way, but they all got the roots in the same place,
Oh yeah, totally.
So
the Goodman, and there's not much blood of that left out there, but what I've seen of the Goodman, to me, holds a pretty high place from what I've seen.
Well, now some of them Goodman hounds and some of the Julys even used to come with a merle spotting in them, and they could even be glass-eyed.
Really?
Yeah.
Shorty's got some Julys out there on the ranch that are leopard color. Merle.
Right. And in talking before, when we did the podcast down at Earl's, we talked a little bit about the history of the Catahoula and what they were made up of and that kind of thing. The merle genetic historically could have come from a couple of different places. One is obviously the Basque Rouge, or what is it? They call it the Basque Rouge in French, but it's the Bûcheron, the French Bûcheron. Okay,
yeah,
comes in a merle color, but he only comes in a blue merle. All right, and then another point of where the merle coloring could have come from in the breed up of these dogs is the original dogs that were shipped over. Even George Washington had them on the presidential grounds, but there was a dog that every foxhound just about goes back to, and a bitch, and it was Mountain and Muse, and they were shipped straight over from Ireland, and they were noted to be a blue merle spotted dog, and they were hounds.
I knew Washington had foxhounds, but I didn't know they were.
Yeah. He actually, he actually got some of the old what a blue tick was started off of over in France. They brought them over. They look like big old blue ticks.
Gaston.
Yeah, yes, I'm sure it was. And that's what, they bred into some of the other things to help, develop the foxhound breed. But anyway, I didn't mean to get us off into the weeds talking about foxhounds, but the point was that the different strains that there are in the foxhound breed all come under one umbrella, and it really should be that way with the cur dogs, because of the development and the historical development of the way the cur dogs were bred up.
Michael Smith is trying to draw fire right now. I've heard
Foot
them called
warmers.
foot warmer curs.
Yeah, I know some guys that raise them. I could probably point him in the direction.
Yeah, those aren't too hard to find.
Yeah, for sure.
You'll find that. You find that in any breed, though.
Sure.
But it's funny. Like you go back. I mean, at least from my narrow point of view, if you go back 25 years ago, Catahoulas did not have that, moniker thrown at them. That was uncommon back then. It's become more common today, I think. But you can't you can't throw anything like that.
What do you think about this? Roy Farabee
At a
throws
whole
it out there. Roy Farabee throws it out. He says, I met tons of leopard cur guys that say the leopard cur and the Louisiana Catahoula are absolutely different dogs.
That's absolutely not true.
No, that's not true.
Yeah.
That whole, like me and Tanner did a podcast with Corey Langford. He has Redfern Hound Supply, and he's a leopard hound enthusiast, and we got into that in depth. And he has a greater understanding of it than I do. But that whole, where one of the Catahoulas names has leopard in it, leopard cur, versus leopard hound, it throws a shit ton of confusion into that. I see that there's a lot of confusion between leopard hounds and Catahoulas.
Well, and the leopard hounds, what they did, and the UKC, and I've talked to them at UKC about this, and let me back up just a little bit. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I'd have to look back at my notes, and I do have notes on it. The president and the vice president of the leopard.
You should have brought those notes with you.
I know it. I've got some stuff right here, but where I can, quick reference here. But the president and vice president of the Leopard Cur Association came to my house, and they had a man named Henry Bud Nussbaum with them, and Bud Nussbaum was out of Magnet Cove, Arkansas, over close to Hot Springs, and they were big, of course, obviously in the leopard curs. And they said, Mr. Plummer, we heard you had a Catahoula dog that was a Tree and Jesse. And I said, well, I like him. And they said, can we go hunting with him? And I said, sure. So we went, and a little bit. We killed about 13 squirrels. And they said, oh, we found exactly what we're looking for. All right, now here's where it gets a little snaky. They said we'd like to breed some bitches to that dog of yours. And I said, well, okay. I mean, as long as you pay the stud fee, that's fine. And they said, now look, we've outbred the Tree out of our dogs. And later on, after that, is when they started the leopard hounds. They changed the designation and crossed them dogs on hounds. And you say, what kind of hound? Well, I wasn't there, but hounds, okay, Tree and hounds. But when they were sure enough cur dogs, most of them, or half of them or so, was bobtail. A lot of them were bobtail, carried a lot of bobtail genetic. And the Catahoula breed used
natural bobtail?
Yeah, and when I was a boy, probably a third of all Catahoula dogs were bobtail.
The one we had was bobtail.
Yeah, and I can speak on that just a little bit, but they told me, they said, we're going to breed these bitches to that dog of yours, and now this is just the fact, boys. They said the papers are never going to show that we were ever here. And I said, well, that's fine. I mean, I don't need it, so whatever. They said, but we understand that the Catahoula dog and the leopard cur are the same dog, and so with your dogs having trend genetic, we want to put that back into our dogs. Well, they bred several females and bought, a bunch of puppies from me. And that's how, Chris, I ended up with my only plot hound I ever owned. Because Bud Nussbaum had bought enough dogs from me that I guess he was getting a little broke in his billfold. And he says, Plummer, he said, I need another pup. he said, but would you trade me? And I said, trade for what? And he said, a plot hound pup. He said, I've got these Brandenburg bred plot dogs. They're good dogs. I said, no, sir, I don't need a plot dog. No way. And, and he said, oh God, he said, man, I bought
and you bred that into your line and you never told anybody.
No,
and that's why you carried on the legs.
That dude right there.
Smart man.
There's no way. Now, hey, one thing he would do, throw dirt in your face and he'd run anything he crossed the track of. It was a box turtle. I mean, he was a game dog who would track, but no, sir, I didn't. I figured if the cross went anyway, it'd need to go the other direction. Try to improve them plot hounds a little bit. At least the leopard curd guys had sense enough to know that,
Yeah, he was trying to skin you for sure.
I think for sure that leopard curs or leopard hounds and Catahoulas are fairly close related.
If you look at back before the days of the internet, and like I say oftentimes, the internet shrunk the world. When I was young, I could look at a dog within our region, and tell you pretty quick where he come from, just from his looks, because one bloodline guy would breed him a certain way. He might have something in his that the other guy didn't, just like we was talking about the cracker curs a while ago, maybe a little bit different put together, but, mostly the same, and what happened with the, when the internet broke out, now suddenly, I can find, for instance, a good example, Jay Folks down in South Louisiana has got a fine male Catahoula dog. Calls him Leroy. He's good conformation. He's perfect in that way. He's got good feet, good top line, good head, good ear set. His teeth are good. Everything about the dog's straight. He's what he ought to be. And he's operating at the top of his game. Well, I would have never known about that Leroy dog if we didn't have the internet. Okay. And so when the internet came in, you had dogs that, like we were talking about earlier, some of them are called leopard hounds, some called leopard bulldogs, that kind of stuff. Well, what that did was that brought them all together, and we're seeing a more uniform dog today than we used to see. Yeah. But now even today you can see, some of them got houndy ears, go back to the hounds. Some of them got the flyaway ears like a bulldog and the big head and the big chest. Well, they're throwing back to the bulldog. But, they're all anymore. They're crossing those bloodlines enough that we're seeing a more, I didn't say a better, I said a more uniform.
Yeah, more standardized breed.
Right.
Well, see, like where I'm at in Oklahoma, if you go back even 20 years ago, a lot of the cow dog guys were introducing small amounts of bulldog or even mastiff into Catahoulas. So our Catahoulas were a lot bigger, I think in general, the old school cats were a lot blockier headed and bigger, but that could just be me, that could just be my understanding of it. But yeah, I totally get it's what works in each region. And those guys that bred bulldogs and mastiffs into Catahoulas, I'm not talking like halves, I'm talking fractions. But if you asked them, those were Catahoulas. I mean,
sure, yeah.
It was not a cross.
Hey, I went and I'll learn to keep my mouth shut one day, maybe. But I went to the Arkansas State hog baying competition over there, and there were some boys come up from Louisiana, and I was walking around looking at the dogs. I'm a hunting guy. I'm not a hog baying guy, for the competition bays. But I do like to, I like dogs and I like dog men, and so here we go, And I'm over there looking at them, and they had this bunch out of Louisiana had a pretty fine string of dogs there, and I said, well, that's a good-looking Catahoula dog you got there. Well, thank you. And I said, where'd you get the American Bulldog at? Oh, my God, son, that was the wrong thing to say. They said, that's a purebred Catahoula dog. I said, oh, okay. Well, boys, I know what an American Bulldog looks like. And,
Yeah.
But if you want to call him a Catahoula, he's a Catahoula. He's not mine. I don't feed him, so whatever. But boy, you can sure get in a yank. And I did that twice in the same day. There was a guy brought in a pair of dogs to bay, and one of them was, he looked like a shepherd that had merle color on him. He had perked ears, and he had a tail that big around that flagged over his back. But boy, he done a good job in the bay pen,
Yeah.
And when the guy come out, I said, I said, brother, your dog's done a fine job. I'm trying to compliment him. And I said, well, what's that dog right there? What's his makeup? He said, well, he's a purebred registered Catahoula dog. And I said, oh, okay. I'm not.
That sounds
I'm
like
not
the
guy
time.
to argue when So
That sounds like the time I ran into my high school girlfriend in Walmart after about 6 years, and she was standing there with her mom, and I was like, she was already dating some other dude. They were pretty serious, and I said, "So when's your baby due?" She looked
Don't
at me
ever
and
guess
she's like,
that.
"Yeah, I was young and dumb. I didn't know any better. I learned the lesson real quick. You never ask a woman that, but I think I did a pretty good job of covering up. I was like, oh, I heard you and so were expecting a kid. So, hey, Michael even agrees with me. Look at this. It's like, if you breed that plot into Catahoula, maybe they could find something.
Oh, easy, Michael. We could be friends maybe in another world. I don't know. But
I don't know what he's got in his profile picture. I really couldn't tell if he was like breed the plot into, I guess he's ripping on Catahoulas. I don't know.
I would think so, yeah.
I'm not one-eyed stupid. I know you can make an F1 cross on about any type of hound and any good cur dog. If you've got a hound that's performing at the top of his game and you got a cur dog that's doing the same, and you make an F1 cross, it's hard to fail with that. If you put him to the brush and you work him, give him the opportunity, you should have a dog. And the reason that I don't do that on the regular, and I know there's a lot of people that do, is you can't duplicate that. Other than the fact of going back to the F1 cross again. Because if you breed them two F1 crosses to each other, genetics isolate, and you got no guarantee of coming up with anything that'll work.
Oh, no, zero guarantee. F1 is, I'm a big fan of F1s, but I'm with you that.
Lay that out. Lay that out. We're getting kind of technical in our talk. Lay out the F1 cross. What is it?
I mean, the F1 is a purebred to a purebred of a different breed,
right? The first generation cross.
That's a more simplified way to say it. First generation cross of two straight
different
dogs.
breeds. First generation cross,
but they need to be purebreds on each side.
Yeah. And what you get with that on that F1 cross is not only are you gaining from the drive of the cur dog and the intelligence of the cur dog and the nose of the hound, but you also get a hybrid vigor in those dogs, and that hybrid vigor, they're healthier, their endurance is better, just genetically a lot more sound, less sickly of a dog than you would in having an old line straight bred dog.
So what's the offspring considered? F2?
No, the offspring of the
offspring
is
first
cross is
that F1.
Is the F1?
Yes. Yeah.
So if I took an F1 and bred it to another F1,
all right, let me give you an example of that, Chris. I hunt with some guys used to down here in Arkansas, and hey, hunters are, well, they're hunters, but anyway, what they did is, these guys would pick up every $50 dog they could find, free dog, hoping to make something out of it, and somebody just happened to drop a half chow off at their house. Okay. Now the dog was obviously chow. He was black, furry, fuzzy, had a blue tongue, had something else in him. They didn't know what it was. So he's a half breed dog. Okay. Well, now, brother, and hey, this gentleman is hazing me about the plot hounds. God bless you, son. But it don't take a plot and it don't take a Catahoula necessarily to be a hog. Okay. So this half chow made a whale of a hog dog and a bear dog. I mean, I've seen that dude bite a bear in the hind end. Bear climbed 25 feet up a tree and the dog's still hanging on him, and you'd think, wow, you're going to kill him falling out of the tree, But of course, they called him Bear, but he was an excellent hunting dog. He was an excellent hog dog, excellent bear dog. All right. Well, one of the guys hunting with him had a F1 cross, half plot and half yellow dog. Okay. Yellow, black, brown, cur.
That's one. Right? That's for hog dogs. That's probably the best F1 you can make. Mm-hmm.
And she was a hog dog. I mean, good hog dog. Didn't think about nothing but a hog. That's what she wanted and did a good job of it. So they had two dogs, a dog and a bitch, both of them at the top of their game, both of them half-breed dogs. So they think, well, we'll breed them together and we'll get a bunch of really good dogs. they bred them together, genetics isolate, like I said. And they had some that was fuzzy like a chow, some had long ears like a hound, some was yellow like a yellow dog. Just a Duke's mixture of mutts. And they didn't have a dog in the bunch that would work. None of them. I mean, just none of them, you know. So that's what you get, you know. And so if it wasn't for guys like me that are out here trying to be the caretaker of the breed for Catahoula dogs, then there wouldn't be that dog to cross to make that F1 cross. So put that in your pocket.
Yeah, I mean that's where, and you know, to my own detriment. I mean, I chased that for probably 5 or 6 years. So, like we said, that F1, and that does not mean that every F1 cross you do is just going to be great,
right?
You know? But even if you do get a great cross on an F1. And then you take those F1 puppies and try to carry it on. That's where the knowledge has to come in, and from that point forward, and that's where all dog breeds were made.
Right,
was after that F1.
Sure.
But it takes a lifetime of knowing what you're doing, breeding on purpose, culling on purpose,
right,
to then push that forward. The first step is easy.
Yeah. And you can take, you know, that F1 cross, and like my buddies that crossed and they got nothing. Okay. But if there are times, sure enough, that, you know, you may have 10 puppies and 2 of them may be jam up dogs. Okay. Well, that's the 2 you want to pick to carry on. And you could, I mean, like Ed's talking about, you could make your own dog breed. It would be a long process because not all of them are going to have those genetics that we're wanting put into them pups. So you got to pick the ones that are, and then hopefully you can pick another to cross with, and then you cull again and go through the process, and eventually you can build a bloodline.
How long you think it'd take? I mean,
it would take. I mean, if you look back, there's cases of that, you know, in America, you know, that close back. But if you look at most of those cases, a single guy can't do it. It takes at least 2 or 3 dudes who have the same vision, who are working together, and like I say, have the same vision.
Sure, because if
it would take and it still takes a lifetime or more.
Yeah,
you know, of the vision staying pure. You know.
Yeah, we got wait, go ahead, Ed. I don't want to disrupt you.
No, I'm pretty much done. But so like I said, I hunted behind an Airedale that was crossed with a hound. That was the best hog dog I've ever seen in my life. And
I mean,
Michael,
all in fun.
Michael, I'm not sure who they're putting that up for, buddy.
I'm not sure either. I'm gonna. It's for Michael. I'm pretty sure.
All in fun, Michael.
So this dog so blew my mind away that I was like, oh my gosh, like I've got to pursue this, and I probably wasted 5 or 6 years, and my F1s crossed. I crossed Airedales on plots and Airedales on walkers, and my F1s, I wouldn't say they were great. They suited me fine, and I was happy with them. But I could never progress past that. You know.
Well, one thing you said, Ed, on the, it would take more than one person, take 2 or 3 or more people working toward the same goal. That's really what happened across the South with the Catahoula breed. Okay. And really with the plot breed as well, you know,
and the Walker dogs too.
Yeah. Yeah. These guys were bloodline raising their dogs, but they, you know, for instance, like on what we call a Catahoula today, now I can cross out on others because they've done the same thing, you know. Yeah. And so a Catahoula is just like any other dog. Like I said on the last thing, you know, God he didn't name him a Catahoula dog. You know, he named him a dog, and man made a Catahoula dog. So if we, if we look at it in those terms, then that's the way every dog breed was bred up. It just takes a long time, and why try to reinvent the wheel? I promise you this, with enough time, I'm getting older and I probably don't have enough time, but with enough time, I could breed from scratch a Catahoula dog. I could make you one, but it would be, what's the need when we've already got them,
Why did some breeds like get there quicker than others? Catahoula, I mean, how many years ago did that? What's the earliest origin of Catahoulas? When the French
1700.
French dogs would be the
1700.
earliest.
Okay.
Yeah. There are, if you look in Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, all across South through Louisiana, Texas, southern part of Missouri and Tennessee, 1700s is when they first historically show up.
So why did some breeds that started at the same time period, they seem to have been more advanced in their consistency and different things than like the Catahoula dog? Like you take the Treem Walker Hound, for instance. If you're a coon hunter, they're more uniform. They're more, even their ability. If you, they've got the treeing instinct, so their consistency in their breed. Michael's talking about having a hard time. Has the Catahoula breed gone through a deal where they became trendy and people started picking them up because they're cool?
Hey,
I mean, Sylvester Stallone had a Catahoula.
Right.
Hey, and I've always said that was kind of the downfall of the Catahoulas, that they were a super pretty dog,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But no, going back to the Walkers, I think they progressed faster because they were a little bit closer they were closer to their origin to what they ended up being. Does that make sense?
For me, I think that the Catahoula, or what we're calling a Catahoula today, and I said I sold one Kid Rock. I didn't. Charlie Booth did, but it was one of my bloodline dogs. Kid Rock got one, but I think he gave it to his girlfriend or something. But
Pam, his Pamela Anderson got a Catahoula.
Oh well, hey. but regionally, the dogs were famous back when they worked them, for their purposes. We didn't have the internet like we do today. Of course, they didn't when they developed the Walker Hounds either. But What you had with Walker Hounds was a lot of times, especially when the running dogs, like the Foxhounds and Coyote dogs that they had, you had big groups of guys that got together and worked those dogs. These Catahoula dogs landed on small farms in the South where, mom and dad had a 2-room shack and 12 kids, and they wasn't going off to competition hunts. They was gathering cattle out of the bottoms and hogs out of the bottoms, and somebody might know your dog for 2 counties away, but past that, nobody knew of them.
They just saw a neighbor twice a year,
right? And these hound breeds, they had competition hunts way back early on, and people come from different states even back then to hunt their hounds, and pit them against one another. And that's just not the way the Catahoula developed. He developed in isolation, really, all across the South. So
that kind of goes back to the definition of a cur. A cur was like a farm dog. Mm-hmm. They did everything.
Well, in the makeup and the breeding up of these dogs, there was never any thought about registries back then. It was the thought of his work ethic and what he could do for you, And so, where your hounds, they started developing pedigrees way back, and
George Washington.
And the Catahoulas didn't do that, So with again, I think one of the reasons that we've suddenly got people from all over the United States and around the world, and it's kind of on fire in Europe and Australia right now, is the internet. They're seeing these dogs work, and they've never seen nothing like that, and they've got instinct and bravery and things that other dogs don't have, and so
except plots.
Yeah, and then you've got what I call hobby breeders, and I hate to rail on those people, but you got especially a lot of women that they're raising Catahoula dogs that don't work them, and they're selling them designer dogs. They want them to look like a Catahoula but behave like a French poodle, and that hurts the breed big time, because if those dogs hadn't been tested for instinct and put to it, then they don't know what they're breeding until you get one
Yeah, I mean,
So,
they're breeding for appearance instead
Yeah.
of work ethic.
Yeah,
historically speaking, I'd like to know how close to Catahoula. He came out of a buddy of mine who is caught a lot of wild cows and stuff like that. He had Catahoulas, and he brought this dog to me from East Texas, and fully grown. He was natural bobtail. He was leopard colored, blue. Had a pretty good blocky head, proportion to his body size, but I bet he wasn't 50 pounds, 55 pounds max.
Mm-hmm.
Is that pretty? Is that the standard for a Catahoula? Should they be a little bit bigger than that?
Well, they need for the standard. They need to be a little bigger. You know,
Yeah, like we're saying, like regionally, like so in northeast Oklahoma, a male Catahoula would typically go 60 pounds.
65, yeah, right there. Yeah,
Or even bigger, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I raised two so they're all Plummer bloodline dogs, but, you know, I've been at this a long time, and I raised two basically different dogs. Now I can cross them back and forth. They've got shared genetics in the back of that, but I raised a running catch dog, what I call them, that are like you guys were talking about, the bigger headed, bigger chested dogs. That'll bite a hog, you know, on these old running boars and shut them down, you know. And then I raise what I call a 65-pound bay dog. Well, now sometimes it's not a perfect science, because sometimes my 65-pound bay dog thinks he's a catch dog, and sometimes my 80-pound, you know, running catch dog thinks he's a bay dog. So, you know, we use them accordingly. But typically, when you get the bigger head, bigger chest, you get a little more bite to them, and they're a little harder headed too, you know. So we try to breed some that way. Now, I don't ever, you know, and I see people all the time and hear people talking about their 100-pound Catahoula dogs. I don't want one of them, but you couldn't give me one, okay? Because it'd be like putting a 400-pound fat man in the Boston Marathon and expecting him to run. Now, he may want to run, but he's just physically not able to. Mm-hmm. And if you get a Catahoula dog too, and you can breed them up. You can breed them up that big, but they're not. As far as their work ethic, now I know people out there right now, their hats are blowing off. Oh my God, my big dog, he does it. Well, not in the heat on a daily basis and covering miles. No, he can't. Okay?
Can't do it. It's impossible.
And so I'm out with that. And then you talk about the small ones. I've had some small ones, and they make fine dogs, and a lot of times they can do the same job for a whole lot less dog feed. You know, for that, you know, and some of my females, even today, I don't mind if one of them's down 50 pounds, you know, weighs 50 pounds, you know, they don't have to be huge to do the job that I want them to do.
Have you had a chance to check out Cajun Lights and Cajun Outdoors? You know, while we're talking about people and companies and different things to support our lifestyle, Cajun Lights is one of those companies. We've got to be diligent in who we're sending our money to these days. Cajun Lights has a whole range of lights, everything from one of my personal favorites, the Micro Gator, just a really handy light. I use it on everything around the house here, use it on the farm, use it when I'm on the road. It's just a lightweight, small light. And then it goes all the way up to one of the nicest competition coon hunting lights you can possibly have with the blinder. But above that, LW Nixon has all of the gear that you're going to need for your hounds, hound care. All of that can be found at Cajun Lights. Check them out. We also offer Cajun Lights on our website, in our shop at houndsmanxp.com. You can order your light right there. The Houndsman XP podcast only endorses products that we would use ourselves, and I do use Elite Nutrition supplements. Elite Nutrition offers supplements for your horses, your mules, your dogs, and even you. These all-natural products work with your dog's natural immune system and its normal, natural body function, not to treat symptoms, but to fix problems. Stop pumping pharmaceutical toxins into yourself or your dogs and start using these all-natural products that work with the perfect system that God gave you. Go to tryelitenutrition.com and check out their products for wound care, prebiotic, probiotic, puppy stuff. It's all there. Parasite control. If you expect extreme performance, you need elite nutrition. And here's a news flash for you. Houndsman XP is a dealer of elite nutrition products. You can check out the whole lineup at houndsmanxp.com in our shop. And we're getting ready to add the full line of horse and mule supplements along with those outstanding dog products that we already carry. What kind of traits are in a Catahoula do you like? I mean, what is the deal? What is it, Raymond?
Okay. Well, when I'm looking,
Sum it up.
yeah, when I'm looking at a dog, whether it's and I really, for me, it starts as a puppy. I want to look at the dog in the litter. I want to see the dog that's independent, that gets out away from his mama, and he's fearless about it. And then I let my dogs run loose as long as I can before they get in trouble, and they always get in trouble. So it's just a matter of time. Usually between 4 and 5 months old, I have to start putting them up because they'll be gone over a mile and a half over here bailing the neighbor's cattle, and the neighbors are all good to me, and I don't need them shooting my dog because he's over there doing the job he wasn't signed up to do,
Right.
So I end up having to put him up. But I want to see a dog when his mama hits the woods that them puppies go with them. Okay. And kind of like you've heard the old stories about the deer races, where they'd send them and, they shoot the first 2 or 3 dogs that come back, just to thin the herd a little bit to where they got the ones that stay hooked the best. But I want them to be independent. And I watch their nose, and I just watch a lot of little idiosyncrasies about them. I want to see that dog's independent, but I want to breed a dog first and foremost that's got intelligence. Okay. And there's a lot to be said about that. And then the second on the list is, and you might think that should be first, but is instinct. I want the dog to have natural instinct. If he hadn't got that, it's hard to overcome that to, build a dog and make a dog do something he's not made to do, So you want him intelligent, you want him with good instinct. And then third, then I start looking at conformation. Is he coon-footed? Has he got a good top line? Is his teeth good? Is his ear set good? Those kind of things.
Should they be high? Should the ear set be high, or how do you consider a good ear set?
And it's according to, and that's a good question, Chris. There's, in the Catahoula breed now, in the NALC, what they do is they've got preferences. They don't like a bobtail. Well, in that they almost put the bobtails to extinction, while the rest of us wasn't paying attention. Okay. And I've got a good analogy for that. I'll share it in a minute if we get time. But when you're looking at the put together of a dog and you're saying, does his ear set matter? Well, yes. And it's according to what you're using the dog for. And you go back to like old dog men, hound men, they'll tell you the longer the ear, the colder the nose. Okay. And now that's not 100%, but it is a good thing to watch. It's a good marker, because if that dog got a good ear on him, then his natural flow will be toward using that nose a little more. And you also want a longer snout. Shorter snout dogs they're typically not as good at tracking as a longer snout dog. So you want to, if you want to,
because he's favoring his hound genetics more
right,
than
right. If you want,
it doesn't really matter that the ear is long. It's just that it's
sure
favoring that hound
right.
genetic.
And
makeup.
the same thing. Like,
do you think that there's hound in Catahoula?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you say, what kind? Every kind. And I'm telling you, that's a fact. People, they want to believe because they've read it, and people that read stuff and just believe it for the truth, they don't fact check. The fact is, these dogs, like when we had regional bloodline men, okay, and I think I mentioned it last time when we was at Uncle Earl's. I mentioned Chester Wager. All right, a few men on planet Earth in modern times have had the effect on a dog breed like Chester Wager has. He lived a long time. He bred a lot of dogs. He bred a lot of good dogs. Okay. And Chester's dogs were primarily cow dogs, because that's what he wanted to use them for, was cows. And his dogs didn't have a lot of lookup. They didn't have that Trean genetic about them, but they were hard driving cow dogs. Now, if you wanted, say for instance, a running catch dog, you'd probably be better off with a dog that's got a bigger head, bigger chest, like a bulldog, and maybe even the flyaway ears, because he throws back toward a little more of a bulldog lineage and he'll be a little more rough when it comes to catching them hogs. So there's no solids and absolutes in it, but you can definitely lead your decision making, with physical features, a little bit.
Roy's got some questions here.
Okay.
Says, seems the cat dog standard is very broad for size and temper. Bay pin bred, that woods bred that. Is this from overbreeding?
Well, I don't know that it's from overbreeding. When you've got a standard, and they did try to write a standard for the dogs now, and it's something that I really personally don't hold a lot of weight in, because if I've got they give a height standard, say for instance, on the dogs, and if I've got a 50-pound dog that works as much as the 70-pound dog, why should I cull him because he's 50 pounds? Well, let me, and I said I was going to say something a minute ago. Let me say this, and it may help answer that question a little bit he's got. I use an analogy, and it's this. Let's say we've got 100 working Catahoula dogs, okay? And this could be applied to
Michael Smith said those are like Bigfoot.
Michael, me and you could be buddies, son. We'd be on the opposite side of the fence. We'd like to be like the sheepdog and the cow when we're clocking in, But nevertheless, say we've got 100 Catahoula dogs, and it represents all, and we use 100 because it's an easy number, and it represents all the working Catahoula dogs that are out there. All right. Now, let's look at some of the things that's happened to the Catahoula breed. Okay. Let's say, well, when I was a kid, and it's just a guess, but I'd say it's either that or more. But when I was a boy, probably a third of all Catahoula dogs were bobtail. All right. Now, in 84, I believe it was, they started this NALC in 79, I think. And in 84, they had a board meeting, decided they was going to make a conformation standard for the dogs. And they decided they didn't like the look of a bobtail dog. All right. Well, now let me ask you this, boys. If we've got genetics of 100 working Catahoula dogs that represent all the Catahoulas out there that are working, okay, and we take a third of them away just because they're bobtailed and crap can them, have we helped the breed? When they were working at the top of their game, had good working genetics, the only thing different they had about them was a bobtail, have we helped the breed by kicking them out? I'd say no. And so now instead of 100 dogs, you've got, 66, All right. Now let's do it again. Let's look at the Catahoula breed, because the hobby breeders, they are bleeding hearts. They can't stand the thought of having a deaf puppy that you'd have to put down. Okay. So they breed away from the double merle because they don't want a deaf or a blind puppy. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, used to, that wasn't the case. And probably a third of all Catahoula dogs were double merles. Okay. Now, put the same analogy together. If you take 100 dogs and you take a third of them out, kick them out just because they're double merle and got a lot of white on them, phenotypically got a lot of white on them, have we helped the breed? I'd say no. Because
your working standards you haven't, but overall health standards.
Right?
Really, you'd say no?
I'd say no.
Really?
Yeah, he'd say no. I'm thinking, but here's the thing: you're talking about the health standards, okay? And here's something that, again, people read and they believe everything they read, and then especially if it jives with their sensibilities, when you take, say for instance, I've got a dog, I call him Doc Holiday, okay? He's a double merle, he's a deep chested dude. He's down at Larry Lumen's house. Larry's a dandy fella. I hunt with him, and he's a good guy. All right. Well, old Doc Holiday's down at his house. He's got a deep chest. He's long legged, long bodied. He can cover some ground. We've used him on hogs, used him on cattle. All right. But what a double merle to do for you is, if you breed a double merle, which is a big M, two dominant merle genes, he'll phenotypically be a lot of white on him. Now, we've culled hard enough over the years in our bloodline that I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you that I've never got a deaf dog, because that would not be true. Okay. But I do have sense enough to put him back to Jesus and spend time on the good ones. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, if I take a double merle dog, whether it's a dog or a bitch, and it's dodged that genetic anomaly of being deaf Okay, they way overplay the blindness. I've only in all my years of raising Catahoula dogs, which is nearly 100 years now. I've had two pups that cropped out with a bad eye, and I'm not talking about a starburst pupil or an asymmetric pupil. I'm talking about sure enough a malformed eye. We knocked those in. Can I say that online? Anyway, they went to see Jesus, and we didn't.
Yeah, the deafness is totally a bigger deal than the blindness.
and we didn't breed that way anymore. All right, now on the deafness, what we've done is we've culled the deaf ones that come up, and we propagate the ones that dodge that genetic bullet, and what you end up with, and I've got a string of females that are almost snowball white, and I've never got a deaf puppy from them. Okay,
really?
When you cull that, and I can show you the pictures. Okay. Matter of fact, I had a little female I called Faith, and she's double glass eyed, perfect blue eyes, perfectly centered pupils. She had a little rust stain on on her ear, 2 or 3 rust stains. And she had a butterfly nose that would tell you she was red genetic. She was pale melanin, but never had a deaf puppy. She wasn't deaf, never had a deaf puppy.
Because I've always thought that the actual whiteness was a direct correlation to the deafness. Well,
and if you look at the Merle genetic in all dogs, I don't care if it's a Great Dane or a Dachshund, okay, or an Australian Shepherd, okay. And here's a really cool thing about the Catahoula breed. They have a Merle genetic, and if you look at the genome strand, the gene itself looks exactly like every other Merle gene you're going to see in every other dog breed. The difference is the Catahoula, and scientists, they're just shaking their heads and trying to figure this out. But the Catahoula Merle genetic is in a different location. It's in a different locus on the genome strand than every other breed. So if you looked at an Australian Shepherd, they know exactly where to go on every breed of dog to find the Merle genetic. It's number so-and-so on the genome strand. But a Catahoula is in a different location. And what they have found, say, for instance, you're an Australian Shepherd breeder, okay, and you're a good Australian Shepherd breeder, then you would know never to breed 2 double Merle Australian Shepherds together, because what's going to happen is you'll get an exponential of deafness and blindness in them puppies. And they'll be snowball white, because when you breed 2 double Merles, it's that way. Now, but what they have found, and I'm not, watch what I say, guys, because they have found that if you cross, and I don't do that, never have, would not, okay? Let me predicate that. But if you breed 2 double Merle Catahoula dogs, not to say you won't get some deafness and blindness, but it won't exponentially grow in the litter because you bred double Merle to double Merle. And so they said the only reason they can figure that is because the Merle genetic is on a different location on the genome strand.
So what do you think and I'm not at the level you're at with Catahoulas. I used to breed them, but I wouldn't breed 2 Merles. I breed a Merle to a solid color dog.
Okay.
But what benefit what benefit did you get from breeding 2 Merles?
Okay.
Yeah. What was the risk? What was the risk?
Where's the risk reward ratio falling at?
So when you breed, say for instance, and I can break it down for every cross that you can make on a Catahoula, and I can tell you what your litter is going to look like within reason. Now, mind you, it's an average, and so it could go north or south of that, but over the life of the bitch, it's an average. Okay. So if you've got, say, for instance, you breed a single Merle, which is phenotypically a leopard dog. Okay. Yeah. I don't care if he's red leopard, blue leopard, yellow leopard, whatever he is. All right. He's a leopard over the most of his body. He's a single Merle, big M, little a. That means he carries 1 dominant Merle gene, 1 recessive solid gene. Okay. Now, if you breed him to a bitch that's the same way, okay, you're going to get a litter that's 50% leopard, single Merle, 25% double Merle, 25% solids. Okay. Now, for me, what I like about a double Merle, now, if you're hog hunting a double Merle in the woods, and Ed probably knows this, but if you've got 4 dogs standing there baying a hog, and one of them has a lot of white on him, that hog's going to hit that white dog. It just seems like every time. I mean, I don't know if they can see him better or what it is, but that hog fires out, he's gonna hit that double Merle dog. So you better have your stitches handy. but what I can do with a double Merle dog, and see, here's how. And boy, I'm gonna set some people off of this. Here's how the yellow blackmouth cur dog breed was developed. Okay, if you take a solid Catahoula dog, say a bitch. All right, I've got a bitch I call Plummer's Black Mamba. She's a bad girl. Okay, now she is an AA recessive solid. I can breed her to a double Merle like Doc Holliday, and she will throw me 100% leopard puppies. Okay, there won't be a solid, there won't be a double Merle, there'll be 100% single Merle puppies. Yeah. You don't have to worry about the deafness, the blindness, nothing. You got 100% spotted puppies. Okay, now what Ed was talking about doing, breeding a leopard to a solid, what that gives you is a 50-50 litter. You'll get 50% solid, 50% leopard. All right. Now, what's happened with the hobby breeders is they're so afraid of getting a deaf puppy that they have changed the whole dynamic of the Catahoula breed. Now we have more solid Catahoula dogs than ever before in the history of the breed. There's so many that they've got Facebook pages that, solid Catahoulas do it better. Oh, all this. They're trying to peddle them solid colored dogs. Now, if you take, say, for instance, an AA recessive solid, all right, and I've had yellow dog color in my dogs. I keep it just to make people mad, but I can have yellow Catahoula dogs. Okay, now if I bred my yellow Catahoulas that are AA solid, recessive for solid, and I bred it to another one, I'm gonna have 100% solid puppies every time. They cannot produce a Merle. There's not a Merle gene there to produce. Okay. Yeah. So the yellow dogs, that's what they are. And even though Kurt Badner's daddy said back in the 70s, and I've got an article that he talks about that, where he separated the yellow dogs back in the 70s because they used to get every color. Okay. In them dogs, they got brindle, just like in a Catahoula. They had even Merle. Okay. They did. And they had all these other colors, and he separated those and got to breeding only the yellow dogs and the black mask and that kind of thing. And so that's, you keep that up long enough, and that's, you'll produce like kind. And matter of fact, I knew a bunch of guys when I was growing up that went down to Mississippi and bought dogs from Mr. Landowner for tree dogs. And it got to be a pretty popular deal, and he had some good tree dogs. And so they went down and got them. And my neighbor had bought a dog and a bitch, and he was hunting them. And of course, I'm a Catahoula guy, and I'm next door, Well, he bred them and had a nice kennel system. He bred them 2 yellow blackmouth dogs, and in that litter, he had 2 blue Merle puppies. He thought he done had a fence jumper. He knocked them dudes in the head and threw them over the fence so fast to make your head spin, because he thought, oh my God, one of them Catahoula dogs done got to my bitch. And that's not what happened. The fact is, it was way back in the day before they had culled all them colors out, and he actually got a couple of Merle colored Landowner dogs is what he had, So,
but I mean, you kind of alluded to it, but and maybe it was just because. So when I was raising Catahoulas, I had a litter for sale. It was them loud colored dogs that went first, and I would end up with 2 or 3 out of each litter that I would keep, and they always ended up to be those solid colored dogs or like a black and tan type dog. They always suited me better, and it got to the point where I would, if I had to pick up a litter, I would grab a solid colored dog or a black and tan, because it seemed like there were just more solid dogs than the flashy dogs. Like, I would pick the least flashy pup out of a litter, and to me, they turned out better than the flashy dogs.
Well, and that may, you may have just drew the lucky straw there and got those that, but I tell people you scan them and they're all the same. Underneath, they are basically the same genetic dog, just the hair color's different.
I've heard that same thing though in a lot of different breeds of dogs. I think, well, I'm a perfect example. You know, if I know what I like to see in a plot dog. Right? There's certain colors of plot dogs, and when I see them and I don't like them, I usually don't give them a very good chance.
So you like in buckskin dogs? That's what you're saying.
What's that?
So you like in buckskin dogs, right?
That came from your Catahoulas, according to Clue Anderson. So
Yeah, if I'm picking a plot, I'm picking a buckskin or a blue, or a blue.
But or a blue tick, or you know, some guys have said it. I know guys that are like, I don't like much brindle on a dog for the plot breed, but it comes from, you had a dog, he was your measuring stick, trying to replace him. I think there's a lot of psychology that plays into that, Ed. I think you had a few solids that worked out for you, and all of a sudden, you know, subconsciously you develop this paradigm that's the color that I like, and that's
Well, I mean, that could totally be the case.
Well, and
I like
too,
the way a dog's built. You know, if a dog comes out with a pointy head and a little nose that he can drink out of a pop bottle out of, I just know that I'm not going to give that dog the chance he deserves.
I had a full Catahoula. It was out of my rebel dog that I said was my favorite dog ever. It was his son. Come out, Brennel. He looked so plot, like
he wanted to be plot, Ed.
he wanted to be a plot. Like Plotman would have said, that's a full blood plot. I named him Plot, and he was a pretty damn good dog.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times, you know, when people look at a dog, and I've had people, you know, a lot of older gentlemen, and you don't see it much in the younger generation, but the old guys used to come and they'd look, if he had 3 hairs coming out of the bottom of his jaw right here, he had to have 3, you know, that's the pick,
Right,
you know,
right, yeah.
or if he's got black in the roof of his mouth, you know, that's the
Calico
pick.
ears of tree dog.
Yeah, and you know, some guys will grab him by the neck and lift him up, and
They don't squeal, that's going to be the
they
dog.
don't squeal, that's the dog, you know.
Yeah.
But what it boils down to, I think, is when they pick the dog that they like, the put together of, the look of, and that's the dog, then they're going, psychologically, they're going to spend more time with that dog.
Go put more time into that
than
dog.
they would another one. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's that, you know, so that, and there's a lot of things that come into play, you know.
You know, we've talked about that. Like I've personally had dogs that were the opposite, you know, 180 degrees from what you're talking about, that I just did not like.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't give them the time that they needed. So then they fulfilled my prophecy of not being worth a damn.
Yeah.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
I've done that. I've done that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I've had them that I didn't like the looks of, kind of like Chris you was talking about. I got an old cracker cur out of Florida one time, brought him up, and I just hated him. I didn't like his looks. Just wasn't no part of the dog that I liked it with his put together. But son, that was an old red Fred, buddy. He's caught 350-pound boars by himself. And the old buddy I hunted with, he said, "Man, you better get to old Fred because you can't hear him with his mouth full." You know, and he'd chew one ear plumb off on one side if you didn't get to him quick enough, and he'd jump out and grab the ear on the other side. And you better get to him before he chews that second ear off.
Yeah. He's going to be on the nose after that.
Yeah. But you couldn't fault his work, man. Ugly as homemade soup, but he'd work, you know. And so I had to put him to the woods. The Monica Willis is asking about a Brennel Catahoula dog.
That's what I was just saying. Like I had one.
Yeah.
I mean, looked like a plot dog.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not sure what she wants to know about.
Well,
Monica, you're gonna have to follow up a little bit and let us know what about the, you know, what are you asking?
Mine was a fighting son of a bitch.
You know,
that was the plot coming out in it.
Yeah, him and his dad, they fought like crazy.
Hey, I tell you, you know, I had a really good and probably only just fractions of a gleam below that blue boy dog. I had an old dog that, matter of fact, when I married my wife, see her family. See, I planned this out. Her family had Catahoula dogs too. Oh, yeah. And she had a dog that she had got on her 16th birthday, and I married her when she was 18. So the dog was 2-year-old, and he had got off the chain a couple of times and caught the neighbor's cattle, and the neighbor had threatened to shoot him if he got into his cattle again. And so they was, you know, trying to keep him up. And so when we got married, I had, of course, not only did I have Catahoula dogs, but I had about 55 head of game bred pit bulls. And so my wife wanted me to go, and she named him Spike. Well, I didn't like Spike. I didn't want Spike. Okay. I didn't like the name Spike. You know, there wasn't no part of that dog I wanted. And
It's too tough of a name.
We'd been married about 3 months, and I hadn't went and got her dog yet. And so I come into the house one day from work, and she says, my daddy said he's killing Spike if you don't go get him, and he ain't killing my dog, so you got to go get him. Well, I didn't want to. I didn't want that dog, but here I go. I'm married. I got to keep my wife happy. Here I go. I go over and get the dog, and I take him off the chain, throw it in the back of the truck, and I didn't tie him in. And my father-in-law says, you ain't going to tie that dog in? I said, no, if he jumps out, I'm sorry. You know, he just didn't make it home. And so we head home, and that dog acted like he'd go in the truck every day of his life. I don't think I could have went around a sharp curve and thrown him out. And so I get home, and I thought, well, her daddy followed me home, make sure I got home with that dog. All right. Well, he jumps out of the truck at the house, and I'm thinking he's going to last about 10 seconds. One of these bulldogs will have him dead. And he didn't. He lived.
He whooped every dog you got.
He knew how to get around them bulldogs. All right. Hey, and I would pull in from work, and this dog would meet me because I left him loose in hopes that maybe one of them bulldogs would catch him and reel him in. You know, didn't happen. Every day when I pulled in the yard, he'd come meet me in front of my truck and run out and tree a squirrel. And he done that. And I mean, I'm a little bit hard-headed, guys, and I didn't like him. I didn't want him. And I went through probably a year of him doing that. And so finally one day I walk in the house and grab a shotgun. My wife says, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to go kill a dog or squirrel off that dog. And I shot a squirrel on him, and a love affair began. Oh my God. I killed a freight train load of stuff with that dog. And I dropped the SP off of his name, called him Ike. And so Ike became my dog. The wife didn't like that much, but he was a brindle Catahoula dog. And back in those days, you didn't see a lot of brindle Catahoulas. They was kind of on the downslide, kind of like some of the other things going on with the breed today. And we bred old Ike quite a bit. And I ain't saying that every brindle Catahoula come from that dog, but we sure did help bring them back a little bit, you know.
Monica followed up for us, Raymond. She says, was talking about the hobby breeders getting away from leopard. I know a lot of bred stripes off them as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I wrote an article one time about that too. You know, it's kind of like the analogy I gave you of the 100 dogs, you know, and if you're taking any part of those working dogs out due to certain, you know, look of them, and they're still performing at the top of their game, have you helped the breed? No. And another thing that we need to be careful of as Catahoula owners and workers is we don't need to be married to that chrome-plated quarter horse, that blue leopard dog. I mean, sure, that's what everybody wants, okay? But the color palette of a Catahoula dog comes so many ways. I mean, creeping tan, saddleback, piebald. You know, they can come obviously solids. They can come in diminished dilutes, double D recessive dilutes. You know, a lot of different colors that can come on a Catahoula dog. And those dogs that work and are those colors, and we're not picking those dogs because we want the blue leopard dogs, what good genetics are we leaving behind when we're only choosing that blue leopard color? You know, we need to, you know, and if you come on my place, we've got, I try to, and this is probably, you know, it's just me, but I try to keep every color palette that's available in a Catahoula. I probably got every color, you know, and the reason is I want to keep those genetics. I want to keep those genetics alive, you know.
Yeah, I mean, color should come secondary to performance.
Oh, sure. Sure, it should be secondary. But what about all those good looking or those good working dogs that are the brindles and the
yeah, I mean that is when I say it comes secondary, I mean it comes secondary. Like we don't breed for color, breed for traits.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean the connotation there is that you go 180 degrees the other direction away from color.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like you say, I mean if a color dog can do it.
Well, you know, and I'll give you guys an example. I went hunting on and I wrote a story about this. It'll probably pick up on it, but I went hunting on a century farm over here in Missouri, and the gentleman that I was hunting with is a superintendent of schools. He's got more college degrees than most people and highly educated, but he loves to hog hunt. He just don't have any hog dogs, so he's got to call me. So he'll call, set up a hunt, and he calls me. And he set up a hunt over on the glade top at a heritage farm, which is 100 years that it's been a farm at least in the state of Missouri. And they give you a designation. Well, we go over there, and this old lady comes out, and she looks like she's as old as the farm. I mean, she's got a few years on her. And we pull up, and there's hog rooting plumb up on the barn wall of her barn. And her son, he's about my age. He comes walking out, and she said, I said, ma'am, I see you got some hog trouble here. I said, we're gonna help you out. And she never cracked a smile. I just fell in love with her right there. She said, Sonny, she said, there's been guys here with dogs before. There's been horses and mules and four-wheelers and bows and arrows and guns and knives. And she said, far as I know, ain't nobody killed a hog. She said, what makes you think you're going to be any different? I said, well, ma'am, I said, I'm not very good at smelling the hog even on my best day. I said, but these dogs are. And I said, now what I am good at is reading sign. And I can tell that sign right there happened last night. And when I put my dogs in that, we're going to go find hogs. Well, her son is standing there, and he's got his quarter horse ready. And he said, sir, he said, you seem pretty confident. He said, you mind if I go with you? I said, come ahead. So he does. And we killed the crap out of hogs that day. Well, it just lit his wood, son. He was on fire. He said, would you sell me a hog dog? He said, I ain't never had that much fun in my life. And I said, no, sir. I said, I'll sell you a pup. In about a year, you'll have you a good started dog. No, sir. He said, you don't understand. I got to go now. I said, well, I understand, but I'm sorry I can't help you. And so we left out. Well, next year, almost year to date, we go back over there. Well, he's ready again, got his quarter horse. And standing beside him, he's got as good-looking a tweed-colored Catahoula dog as you ever laid eyes on. He's built like a German short-hair pointer, deep chest, good head, ear set. Man, he's a good-looking dude. And by the way, tweed is what the NALC calls a patchwork dog. Okay? All right. So there he is, and he says, you mind if I go with you again this year? And I said, come ahead. I said, your place. Couldn't keep you from it. And I said, more than Mary. He said, what? He kind of stuck his chest out. He said, got me a dog. I said, I see that. By chance, where'd you get that dog? He told me. I knew of the breeder. I don't know him personally. And so we kick out and go hunting. Well, my dogs go find hogs. They're hunting, find hogs. His dog don't do anything. Well, I'm making an excuse for his dog in my mind. I'm thinking, well, they can be a little hawky sometimes, and, new people, new dogs, something like that. He's just not getting out. Well, we go on and we bay 2 boar hogs in a brush top, just down a good slope there on Calface slope. And we got the good seats at the top watching them bay. They're jumping in and out of that brush top, throwing slobber, man, just knocking it out. Doesn't get any better. That's what we do it for. All right. And so I look over, and that dog of his looks like he's Velcroed to his left side. And I shouldn't have said it, guys, but I let my mouth get away from me. Because normally, I don't care if you're feeding him, you like him, I love him. I don't care. He's not on my dog string, so I don't have to worry about it. But I looked over at him, and here's this good looking Catahoula dog. And he ain't barking, he ain't moving, he ain't going down there to help, nothing. I said, I'd shoot that dude right where he stands and bring his collar back to the truck with me. And he said, well, why? I said, because he's not got 1 ounce of instinct that a Catahoula dog should have. I said, I promise you, I'll go to the dog pound, which we call them the Humane Society nowadays, give them some human rights. But the dog pound, I said, I'd go to the dog pound, and I promise you, I could find a pen full of dogs that fly off this hill and help my dogs bay that hog down there. Now, they might not hunt it up, most likely wouldn't, but they got enough instinct to bark at one. And I said, yours don't even do that. I said, that's what's wrong with the Catahoula breed today, and I'd kill that dude. And, of course, he didn't, and that's what's wrong with the Catahoula breed. A lot of times, you've got to be very, very careful about what you get, So,
yeah, I mean, it takes like you were talking about earlier, like it takes a certain attitude to be able to deal with the Catahoula. Like you got to have a hard hand because they're hard-headed dogs. So you got to be willing to put yourself in front of that. And then you also have to get rid of that like human attachment and love to a dog without any reason behind it, That's why I always say like the worst thing for the Catahoula is that they're so pretty.
Oh yeah, it's
our culture is just checked out on the the whole idea of culling for performance. They don't
Yeah,
understand.
it's easy to call it an ugly dog. It's hard to kill a good-looking one. But yeah, let's.
Oh yeah.
Chris, why don't you get us into some questions here?
Yeah, Michael Smith's got some good ones here. He's wanting to know how you hunt your dogs. Are they track dogs, long range, cold nose, etc.?
Okay. Well, I tell you, Michael, here's what I do, and I do a lot of things different than a lot of guys. One thing is, like, I hunt in 3 or 4 states. I'll hunt Texas and Oklahoma and Missouri and Arkansas. Okay, and each one of those has a different terrain in the areas I'm going that really challenges the dogs. Okay, if I'm hunting in the mountains, that's a dog, like I've told Ed and Chris before, a dog that's used to hunting flat ground in Texas or Oklahoma, and you bring them up here and put them in these mountains, and they're a hog dog, sure enough, hog dog. These old mountains can up and down, can yank the want to out of one pretty quick. And so, he's got to be able to do that. But now, to answer your question, how do I hunt them? Are they track dogs, long range, cold nose, etc.? They can be all those things. But here's you got to train your dog. And people ask me all the time. They said, "Are your dogs cold nose or hot nose?" Well, it's really according to you a lot, because when I start my dogs, I start my dogs as puppies. I'll start at 5 weeks old with them tracking me. And then we'll go from there to other small game and that kind of stuff. And they learn to run a track. All right. Now, you say, for instance, them boys down in Arkansas, they hunt a lot of timber company down there, the timber company cutovers down there. And them old briars and pine trees are so thick, and them cutovers, you can't fall down in them. I mean, they're thick. And a lot of dogs that hit the edge of that, a rabbit can't hardly cut it. And they'll look back at you like, "You want me to do what? You want me to go in there?" Yeah, I do. And so, but when they're running down them timber company roads looking for hog sign, they'll cross a place where maybe a hog is crossed. It's got a little time on the track, and it's an old sign. And they'll look at it for about 2 seconds, say no, and they're blowing on at 35, 40 mile an hour with dogs' tongues hanging behind them, running behind them, trying to catch up them wheelers till they can find a hot track to put them on. All right. Well, what they're doing is they're teaching their dogs to be hot nosed. Okay. And only taking a hot nosed track. Now, what I've done to them so many times is when we cross those older tracks, if I believe, like I said, I've been at this long enough, I can look at that hog sign and I can tell you within reason how old it is. Okay. And so if I think it's old enough or fresh enough that a good cold-nosed dog should be able to take that, we're going to stop right there and camp out on it. And they say, "No, Plummer, we can get a hot one. We can be faster. We can get another one going." I say, "You boys go ahead. We're going to stop right here. And I'll take them dogs. And if they check it, because I'll cast them with my hand, and if they check it and I can see that it didn't take, they didn't pick it up, we'll walk down that track a little further and I'll cast them again. And we'll keep that up until they can't pick it up, and then they pick it up and go. And then we bait the hog. So what I'm teaching them to do is to take the time to work that cold track out. And if you don't, now there's dogs that will naturally do that. And then there's dogs that you can train to do that. And these
It's a conditioned response.
Yeah. You can train them to be that cold-nosed dog. And, and you've got guys that, you're talking about, do they track? Do they go way out? Do they hunt close? Again, a lot of it has, not all of it. Now, there's certain dogs that I don't care how much you put their boot in the hind end, they're not going to go 1,500 yards and make a loop and come back. They're going to run a smaller loop and come back to you. And if that's the case, that's what you got. But we always work on tracking with those dogs way ahead of actually putting them in the woods and making that their job. So when I do bring them to the woods for the tracking, now I do get them in the woods and get them in the environment. Okay. But when I actually ask them to start going and tracking, it's not new to them. They know how to do it. And if they pick up a track, sure enough, well, yeah, they'll take that thing to glory, and talking about the F1 crosses and the hounds. And again, guys, I know, everybody lives vicariously through their dogs. And if you've got, I don't care if you're hunting plot hounds or yellow dogs or Catahoula dogs or what you've got, out there, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into that dog in time. And that's what you're hoping for him to be the product that you want him to be. And with my dogs, I will say this, every dog you own is not the best dog that you've ever owned in your life. Okay. There are, if you've been at it long enough, you had one or two that you'd say, wow, this one, he legs up, he's above these others. Now, these others are good hunting dogs, and I enjoy hunting them, but wow, he was a rock star. Okay. And so you're going to have that. But I have actually, and I've done it many, many times, just wore them guys out with them plot hounds because my Catahoula dogs put their head in there and run.
Oh, no.
And a plot hound just can't keep up.
Oh, no.
hey.
No.
I know. I thought I might get a little response out of Christmas. But, hey, oh, man. There it is.
You got the jackass.
Hey, we went over to Oklahoma. There's an old gentleman over there, and it's been several years ago. He's probably dead and gone now. But he was a
What's his name?
It's been a long time.
You said black man?
No, he was an older gentleman. But he had plot dogs, and he when we got to unloading them spotted dogs over there, he went to mumbling and cussing, all them spotted dogs. I'm like, well, we went for 3 days over in them Calmeech Mountains over there, and guys, I'm telling you for a fact, I know he had hog dogs. I know he did. Okay, but his plot dogs never made the first bay. We bayed hogs for 3 days straight, and then plot dogs never caught up to get there. And so when we got ready to load up to leave, he said he couldn't compliment me because he was pissed off. But he said
I'm getting there.
He said he said I got one question to ask. And I said, what's that? He said, how do they find them so fast?
Hey, and those Calmeech Mountains are no joke. It's tough over there.
Roy's threw out a question here. Says, so do you believe you can train a dog to be cold-nosed?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's a conditioned response.
Do I?
What'd you say, Chris?
I think it's a conditioned response. If you only put your dog down on a box shake and rig strike, well, I don't know if it's a bear or whatever, a coon, I think you can condition them to have the want to follow a cold trail. I think.
Well, I mean, I know for a fact, like if you just constantly, so like with the invention of cell cameras, so we'll start puppies 1, maybe 2 times on a feeder a feeder with a cell cam that we know pigs have been here within 5 minutes. So conversely to what Roy's asking, I know you can definitely train one to be hot nosed.
Yes.
If you do that too much,
I've done it with police dogs. I've done it with coon dogs. I see guys do it with coon dogs. As soon as the dog starts mopping the track a little bit, man, they hustle in there and they send them on. And so you're conditioning that dog. Okay, I know if I stop here and I work this, I'm going to get my tail switched. I'm going to beat it on through here and find a coon that I can put up. And I've also done it with the bear dogs, and where you get out there on the ground with them and they start bogging down a little bit. I've done exactly what you do, Raymond. It's like, hey, if you guys want to go ahead, I'm going to stay here and with this dog, I'm going to walk this track out.
Well,
so Tanner, Tanner, me and him hunt together. So he had a pup. Shit, she was probably a pup 3 years ago. Straight cur dog. Crossed up dog, but all cur. But for a cur dog, she had a phenomenal nose. Mm-hmm. And she was aggravating as all get out. So she would get in there deep and would start cold trailing, but she couldn't finish it, mm-hmm. And she would just waller a hole in the dirt. I'm talking hours.
Blue tickle.
Hours.
Blue tickle. Yeah.
Blue ticking around.
Picking on the other breed now.
Well, blue ticking around.
Call it what it is, brother.
And Tanner's a dog man. But he said one night, he was frustrated because it's aggravating. All your buddies are there and your dog has been, wallering a hole in the ground in a 200-yard circle for 2 hours. And it had been going on and on and on. And he's like, I think I'm going to call that bitch. And I said, man, Tanner, give her some time. I was like, she's got a nose. She just doesn't know how to use it yet. I'm like, we just got to sit here and grit our teeth and let her learn. And it probably took her a year and a half. And today she's the number one dog in his yard.
Well, Ed, I tell you what, could have helped her along the way a little faster is to put a faster dog with her and let her leave her, on the track and let her be sucking, blue ticking that track and barking every time her foot hits the ground. And,
well, we didn't have one. We didn't have a dog that had as good a nose as she did that had speed to it. So she had to learn it all.
And I tell you another thing that I've noticed about, some of my cur dogs that were so-called cold-nosed, okay, or able to run a cold-nosed track. What I see about them, and again, guys, you probably don't know, but I'm a cur dog guy, okay? So
I would never guess it.
Yeah. So here's the deal. Where when a hound is out there working that track and it's cold and he's blue ticking it, it's taking him 4 hours to get out of his own shadow out there working that track, he will eventually come to the end of it. But what I find with my Catahoula dogs that can run a cold track is almost like they can read sign a little bit, because they'll run that, they'll put their nose on the ground, sure enough, if they've got to, and they'll pop, and I tell people they can suck the leaves off the ground smelling, and they'll go along, but then they'll get their head up and go, and then they'll pick that track up again, and then they'll go, and they'll pick that track up again and go, and every time they do, they're stretching that hound.
How many dogs are you running together? How many dogs you run together like that? Well,
what I typically do, and you can have too many, and there's many times we've been out and it looked like an English fox hunt because, I might bring 2 or 3 and my buddy brings 2 or 3 and the other guy brings 2 or 3. And the next thing you know, you got too many dogs, but for me, it's best. I usually run like 3 cur dogs together, that way. And
have you will they relay a track?
Yeah.
I've seen Shorty's dogs will do that. Shorty Gorham, he runs those running dogs, and we've hunted that brush country down in South Texas. And you have dogs working all around you, and you get a bump over here, and all of a sudden, something opens over here. Man, you start seeing dogs feeding to him, and that's what he wants.
Mm-hmm. Right. And when they'll honor another dog and relay off of them like that, it does cut that track down for you.
Yeah.
But now, Jerome McDaniel over in Eastern Arkansas, he's probably at one time, he was probably the closest thing to a professional hog hunter as the state of Arkansas had. And me and him have bred dogs back and forth for years. He's had some great dogs and he's a hog dog guy. But when back in that heyday of that old blue boy dog, we could come into a big rooted up place, and it may be some time on it. It may be an older sign. And all the dogs would run in there and start checking in that rooted up spot. And then the next thing you know, you'll see that old blue boy dog get his head up and he's making a circle out there. And he'll pick that track up 30, 40 yards past that, do it again, pick it up. On it. Next thing you know, he's Hank Snowed them. He's got the hog bait and they're still stuck in there trying to figure out where it went.
That's what it's funny because even before you said that, I was sitting there thinking like, some of the better cur dogs that I've seen have a tendency to where if they can't work something out, they just start making loops, getting wider and wider till they do pick it up. Where like a hound wants to
follow straight on out,
step for step.
Yeah.
But we're like a cur dog, like I say, we'll start making loops till they
I've seen a Yog Terrier do that.
Well, I sent a dog I called Savage Sam over to Jerome one time, and he had a couple of F1 crosses on some redbone hounds, and they were hog dogs for us. Now they was, and so he's down at Willow, Arkansas, and he's coming off a little old ridge down there. And I told him when he got that Sam dog, I said, "Now look," I said, "It's kind of like the old Dr. Seuss stories, He was a winding machine, and if he ever stuck his nose straight up in the air and went to check in the wind." I tell people he would wuffle and he'd snuffle, and he'd pick up that scent. And buddy, when he blowed out of there, he was sure you might as well just go to him because he's got it. All right. Well, he was coming off a ridge there, and he said he noticed that dog do that. And he said, and I thought about what you said. And he said, I'm watching him, and I'm fixing to honor what he's doing. He said, until them 2 F1 redbone crosses that he had, opened, and he said, and where the Savage Sam dog, when he was winding, he fell off the right side of the ridge. He said them 2 red bone F1 crosses off a Catahoulas dog fell to the left side. And they're doing exactly what Ed said. They're running every step of that track. What Jerome figured out real quick was when that Savage Sam dog winded and fell off to the right. Well, Jerome says, I ain't had him that long, and I've had them 2 red bone F1 crosses since he's puppies. I trust them, So he went with them. Well, they tracked plumb around the end of that point and come back, and the Savage Sam dog had the hog bayed when they got there.
Yeah,
he said, I sure could have cut a lot of walking off if I'd have just followed him instead of, going every step of the track with them F1 cross hounds,
He took the long way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's
Michael,
what winning is. That's what winning is taking the shortcut.
That's brains. That's the brains of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Michael says you get what you put into a dog, but they have to already have it in them. And I agree with that. I mean, you can't they got it in there. Yeah, that's what it goes beyond just training a cold-nosed dog. My bulldog will smell things that my hound can smell, but he may not have the desire to go track.
Sure, and that's why we do what we do on our end is in bloodline breeding these dogs is we want a dog that is predisposed to do the job, and then we put him to the job and help him in the process and develop him, and then we can be proud of him.
Right.
But if you take a dog, like say for instance that guy that I went hunting on the Century Farm and he had that pretty tweed colored dog, I don't believe you could ever made that dog work.
Right.
He just didn't have it in him.
We just get I've gotten bogged down in the cold nose, hot nose thing in the past, the whole debate in the past. But I just think if you drive down the road and you see a bear cross the road and you continually dump your dogs out on a bear that you see cross the road, then you're gonna have dogs that can't. You're gonna have a 5-year-old dog that can't run a track.
Right. It happens.
If you only drop loose on the box shaker and you never let that dog down to get out in the brush and figure things out, you're gonna have a 5-year-old dog that's not a track dog.
Right.
But they got to have that drive. I still say that track dogs, cold nose versus hot nose, has more to do with the hunt drive and the drive to chase than
he's got to have an understanding that there is an animal on the end of that cold track, and all he's got to do is be persistent enough to find him. And you can take a dog that'll work a cold track and work hot tracks with him every time, but you can't take a hot track dog that ain't never worked a cold track and do the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, in hog hunting, it's we kind of want hot tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Like cold tracks usually lead to game wardens. So I mean,
what you're saying is you're going to be in the woods long enough, the game warden could sneak up on you if you know.
Well, I mean, a hog covers so much ground that typically in hog hunting, because we're not hunting New Mexico where we got 40,000 acres,
4 million acres,
4 million acres. So, typically, I would say in hog hunting that we're pointing our dogs towards a hot track more than a cold track. Well, if that makes sense. And
that's what's happened with the Walker dog in competition coon hunting. They got to get dogs that get out there and get those coons on a scorecard. They don't have time to sit around and listen when blue. That's
what happened with the nocturnal nailer in the Walker dogs. Them dudes would grab a slick telephone pole and trees, and they're all about getting trees, you know.
Yeah.
And they, to my mind, they've almost ruined the Walker breed back in the day. I don't know how much of it's going on now. I haven't kept my thumb on it, but back 10 years ago or 15, man, there was enough of them nocturnal nailer dogs, especially in competition coon hunting, that they were hard to compete against because if they wouldn't do nothing, they'd fall tree, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I love to listen. I mean, there's nothing I like better than listening to a cold-nosed dog trail. But like where I'm at, it's not super practical to do.
Well, I know guys over in Virginia, that I've hunted with and we've had the discussion. There's so many bear there. The area to hunt's narrow, drops off to private on both sides. They just like you said. cold tracks lead to game wardens and landowner complaints and stuff like that.
Well,
So-
you know, it's according to how fast you can walk in the woods, Chris.
And if you can walk without a light,
You know,
Yeah.
I tell you what,
it depends on the moon.
I hunt down on the Buffalo National River quite a bit, and they made that a designation now of a WMA, and so you're not supposed to bring dogs down there anymore. Well, I had.
Are you kidding me?
Oh, that's right, and they're eat up with hogs down there. Now it's rough. It's rough old country down there.
You're talking in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, in Arkansas, you can't hunt a hog with a dog on public land.
On the WMA, sure can.
Yeah.
That's the way it is in Tennessee, I think, as well.
And so I had a sergeant over there, and he told me he knew I hunted down there all the time. And he said, Plummer, you're going to have to quit hunting over here on the buffalo now. He said, they changed that to WMA. And I said, look, I've been feeding them dogs for years, and I'm not going to quit, you know. And he said, well, now look, and I was a game warden at the time, but he was my supervisor, and he says, I'll have to write you a ticket. And I said, you're never going to get that opportunity.
You have to take me first.
Yeah. He says, how do you figure? I said, well, you know, and I know if I'm one step ahead of you in the woods, you've lost me. and by the time I get back, you know, there's not going to be anything that you can write me a ticket for. So, you know.
So a few years back, it was after Arkansas passed that law. I was hunting in Arkansas. We was hunting a tournament. Well, the first day and the first night, we was hunting public land or private land that bordered public. Well, all these hogs we would strike would just make a beeline for that public land.
Sure, they know how to get away. Yeah.
So the first day and the first night, when we come to that fence, we stopped. And that next morning, I told those guys, I said, we ain't stopping today. You know, we're going. And so we did. We caught a shit ton of pigs. And I think we got second in that tournament. Well, I come back home, and that Monday afternoon, a friend of mine who ran the Arkansas Dog Hunter Association called me. He said, Edward, you was in Arkansas this weekend? I said, yeah. He said, man, I just had one of the game wardens over there send me a picture and asked if I knew who this guy was.
It looked a whole lot like you.
And he said, Ed, you couldn't have, he's like, you could not have went to a studio and got as good a picture of you as he's got. and he's like, well, I told him I didn't know who you were. But he said, dude, if he puts it on the internet, he's like, you're gone. I was like, well, was there a picture of me with the pig? And he's like, no. But there's a few pictures of you, and you're side by side, and you got a very distinguishable dog box, you know. And I said, well, if there ain't a picture of me with a pig, nothing ever come of it.
Hey,
but my point is, when they did that, they literally just trained those pigs instantly. Pigs are smart, and they knew. You know, they don't know the laws, but they knew we get over here, those people don't come after us.
Right.
Arkansas just created sanctuaries.
Oh, they did
for hog breeding,
and they're going to pay the price. I mean, they'll pay the high price of it later. But he's dead now. But God bless him. Charles Clark used to live down there at Compton, and he had bought a couple of Catahoulas dogs from me, and he lived right next to the national park. He bordered it, and he had a pen full of Russian European hogs, and it was just net wire, you know, and so when they got a certain size, they just hopped the fence and down into the park they went, you know, and so the park just hated, and the game wardens down there just hated Charles Clark. Well, he rode a little white mule, and he was a little short fella. He had cowboy hat. He looked like Yosemite Sam, and he kind of had the temperament of him too, you know, and and so they had an elk hunt down there, and every year they would call us all down there to work the elk hunt. All right. And so there'd be like 30, 40 game wardens from across the state come up, and we'd work the elk hunt. Well, we stopped there at the little Compton store to eat breakfast, and there's probably 30 game wardens in there. And the game warden that was in that county was sitting at a booth down there. And old Charles pulls up to the big windows in the front of that little old store, and he's got two big old Catahoula dogs standing up on the box looking over the top of the truck. And he comes walking in with his cowboy hat on and jangling his spurs, and he looks, and he sees me down there and all them game wardens, and he says, Plummer, he said, and he just almost hollering. He said, I'm going squirrel hunting over on some private land. And he said, thought you might want to go with me. And I said, well, I'm working, Charles, can't go. I said, but I'd like to. If I could, I would. And he said, well, I'm gonna get out of here. So he leaves out. Well, the guy that's in that county, he is upset because everybody there knew Charles was going hog hunting, and he's going on the park. Okay. Well, as fate would have it, that evening for supper, we all gathered back into that store. Here he comes rolling back in there with his truck, and he's got 2 big boar hogs laid on his toolbox, and them Catahoula dogs standing on them boar hogs looking over the top now. And he walks in, and he says, Plummer, he said, you ain't going to believe it. He said, I was squirrel hunting over on some private land, and he said, these hogs attacked my dogs, and I had to kill them in self-defense.
Well, I mean, my deal was always, so people would say, well, now, I'd say, well, I'll just squirrel hunt. Mm-hmm. So you can't say you squirrel hunt, you had 2 bulldogs on the top of your dog box. Is it against the law to hunt with squirrels with bulldogs? Like,
I'm saying,
and are you gonna throw me in jail because I got trashy dogs? Like, how does that even work? I literally think, I mean, it's one of them deals where, it probably cost you more to fight it, and you might win, but it's winnable,
Well, Ed, I've always been one of them guys that would die on the hill, buddy. If they ever was to write me a ticket, and here's my issue with it. Okay, for one thing, say for instance you've got a border collie, okay, and you've got some sheep, and your sheep get out. Okay, now in Arkansas anyway, the way the law reads, they define feral as having been loose out of a pen for 3 days.
3 days. In Oklahoma, it's like 14, I think.
If it used to be. I mean, I don't know what it is now, but years ago, that's what it was, 3 days. All right. So now, I don't know if you are better than me at it, but I can't look at a sheep and tell if he's been out for 3 days.
No.
All right. Now, another thing is, if that sheep gets out of my pen, I'm well within my rights. That's my animal. I can take my border collie and go get my sheep, and ain't nobody going to say a word. I can do the same thing with a cow. If my cow gets out, I can take my cow dog and go get my cow. But some reason, and see, they don't want to incorporate the hog as a game animal. So they cannot manage hogs in any state that they don't take the hog in as a game animal. And what they tell you is that hogs are not indigenous, so that we can't take them in as a game animal. So if they're not going to take them in as a game animal, then how can they write rules and laws about your private property?
Yeah.
See, I mean, that's a Duke's, a mixture of a problem there. And so if I've got my Catahoula dog, what makes him any different than the border collie going to get sheep?
Yeah.
And so have I not got a right to go get my hog? And they can't prove it's not my hog. They can't look at that hog, even though he's long-haired and woolly and tushes out to here, and he's mean and all that. They can't prove that he didn't just get out of my pen. So how do you prosecute that?
Yeah,
well,
and
a prosecutor's can only file a case that violates the law, and somebody driving down the road with a hog on their box, or a coon dog. Say they got a coon dog box and everything, and they're driving down the road in the middle of the night, and the guy's got a .22 rifle in his truck during closed season. Can't write that guy a ticket for possession of the rifle because he's driving down the road. It's not illegal for him to drive down the road with that. And the place where a lot of these game wardens get a bad name, and I watched it because I was a supervisor, is that they try to write this kind of stuff that isn't a crime. Just because you feel like it's a crime doesn't mean it's a crime. At one time, you could not possess a .22 rifle in the woods at night if you had a coon dog loose and during the training season. Well, a few years ago, before I retired, they decided that we were going to honor the Second Amendment here in Indiana. And the colonel pulled me aside and he said, we were in service training up at the academy. He pulled me aside and he said, you see any problem with coon hunters carrying a firearm with them? And I'd told him for years, I was like, coon hunters, I was like, if you're going to be carrying a gun and you're going to say it's for self-defense, make sure it's not a scoped up and shoots rifle that you can, pluck a coon out of the top of a tree from a mile away. It's, carry a snub nose 38 or something like that. But technically, I was telling them to break the law. I was just telling them how to be defendable on it. But he said, "Do you see any problem with people carrying a gun?" I was like, "No." And he said, "Well, I don't either." He goes, "If our officers want to arrest people for killing coons out of season, they can get their butts in the woods and get under the tree with them and watch them kill a coon out
and
of
catch
season."
them. Yeah,
Right.
it's like in Oklahoma. So used to, I mean, you go back far enough in my lifetime, we could do anything we wanted to with pigs on public land.
Right.
Starting about 15 years ago or so, probably if you went back 15 years or before, the word pig or hog didn't even show up in the game regulation book.
Right.
So then they started passing laws, and one of the laws they passed maybe 10 years ago was you couldn't, it was a mandate that any pig that you catch, you kill immediately. So when they were proposing this law, me and a couple other guys went down to we went over to Oklahoma City and talked to the Fish and Game Department. And we're like, this doesn't make any sense, And they're like, well, we want to drop the number of pigs. And I was like, well, if it's summertime and I'm hog hunting, if I catch a pig 40 minutes into the hunt and I got to kill it, my hunt's over, because I got to kill it and I got to get it back home before it spoils. But if I can tie that thing up, I can tie him up and I can go on, I can mark his spot and go on hunting. At the end of the hunt, I go gather up the pigs that I've caught that are still alive, haul them out alive, take them to my house, and then kill them, then butcher them. So I was like, we can actually get rid of more pigs by not mandating that we kill them. And
yeah, because you shoot one, your hunt's over.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, you're done. Unless you just want to let it, the buzzards eat it.
Right.
And they went ahead, of course, they went ahead and passed that law. And then I was talking to our game warden here in Cherokee County after they passed that law. And I was kind of feeling it out to see, where
How much you could get away with.
Yeah, how much I could get away with. Like, can I tie this thing up?
The loops and the
Yeah, can I go ahead and tie it up and tie it to a tree and then keep hunting and then come back, kill it, throw it on my truck and drive out of the public with it dead? He said, no, he said, well, he gave me some leeway and he said, well, you could do that, but you can't turn them loose. And I said, okay. I said, well,
what's the
said,
intent in the law?
I said, I'll just tell you straight up, Brady, like, my knots ain't that good. So, I mean, if he gets loose, do I get a ticket? If you find my rope in a tree and no pig? And he didn't really have an answer for that.
Well, now think about this, Ed. If you go hunting and they're mandating you kill one pig, as soon as you kill a pig, you got to get him out of the woods and basically your hunt's over. And if you're able to go on and, you can catch several, so there's a possibility that way. But let's say your pig does get loose. You're out there hunting, but you do kill some pigs along the way. Whether it's that night or another night or in your career, you're killing some hogs. So any hog you kill helps.
Is a bonus.
Yes, helps drop the numbers. Okay, and if one gets away, is it any worse than if you didn't go hunting at all? No, it's not. The amount of pigs in the woods hadn't changed any because you let one go.
That's what a friend of mine. That's what his argument was, and he would always, and he was not bashful about telling wildlife department about it. He said, because they're always talking about moving pigs. It's like, okay, first off, pigs are already in every county. At this point, we're talking. They weren't in the western part, north, Panhandle maybe, but central Oklahoma, east, they were in every county. So, well, you guys are moving pigs. And my buddy was like, what does it matter? If I catch a hog in McAllister and turn it loose in Tahlequah, he's like, it's still just one pig.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, if that made any sense, if I was a cattleman, I'd just go grab some cows out of this pasture, move them to that pasture. I still got as many cows as I had before.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's right. And I
let me ask you this. Let me ask you a question. So we've had a resident population of wild hogs in South Central Indiana for as long as I can remember. It's been at least 40 years, but it doesn't seem to be growing. Why do you think that is?
I mean, they're just going to grow. They're going to grow to the point that the terrain can provide for them.
Yeah, but they ought to be spread and following river systems and spread out across the state. If the biologists, if everything they've told us about these wild hogs is true, that they're gonna overtake everything, because a lot of these landowners don't even let people in there to hunt, and you can hunt the national forest down through there anytime you want, but this wild and crazy hog invasion that everybody's been expecting in Indiana has never happened.
Okay,
in
so
the
it's
last 50 years.
Obviously, so why do people or any wild animal move? They move because they need more resource. So if the population's not getting to the point where it can't sustain that population, why should they move? I mean, they're not just,
they've got to have sustainability and they've got to have food, water, shelter, space, and arrangement. And if they've got those all in a given area, then you've got a population of animals that can survive. And if there's one of those that's outside of that, whether it's shelter, okay, then maybe they got food and water and space to run around, but they ain't got no place to be safe, then they're not safe, and that population's not going to thrive. Same thing if you've got food and water and shelter, food and shelter, but you don't have water, and they got to travel 20 miles over here to get a drink, that population's not going to survive. They've got to have it all within a given range where they can survive.
The area I'm talking about would look very much like where you're at in the Ozarks.
Mm-hmm.
Wooded hills, food source. It just doesn't make any sense. What I'm saying is, I'm just wondering. These biologists have hung their hat on these pig invasions, and it's not happening in Indiana. And they've got all of those things. They've got the arrangement, the food, shelter, the whole 9 yards. They've got it all.
Well, what I'm saying is maybe they don't have a reason to move. So I don't anymore, but we used to hunt extreme North Oklahoma, and we would very regularly get into Kansas and catch pigs. So my brother-in-law is from Kansas, more like central Kansas. And we've had the discussion many times, and he used to hunt with me when we hunted North Oklahoma and South Kansas. And it's like, why are those pigs not, because southern Kansas is Oklahoma. I mean, it's brushy, it's not hilly where we're at. It's flat, but it's covered in brush. We've had the discussion many times, like, why would those pigs not move north into Kansas where there's just like field crops in abundance, and they just never seem to do it, And I think it's because they don't have to. I think if it gets to a point where they need to, I think if the population of pigs in North Oklahoma, South Kansas got to a population where they needed to push to survive, then they might.
What I see here in the Ozarks a little bit is we've got places that I hog hunt that the farmers, they'll say, well, we don't have hogs. We've never seen hogs. Okay. And we go into the timber around their places and
catch hogs.
And catch hogs, and they say, well, why don't we see them? And here's what happens. Oh, every blue moon, we'll have a mass crop failure. Okay. And when we do, hogs are an acre and vacuum cleaner. I mean, they will. But you watching these Ozark Hills, they'll work out a ridge and they'll turn the whole ridge over looking for acorns, and then they leave that one. They may pass two to get to another one and start doing it again. And I've seen them travel 10 miles in a day. Just picking their nose up and every once in a while maybe grabbing an acorn and just walking on. And so they can cover a lot of territory that way. But a lot of these you're talking about, they're not seeing them, outside of that. And Ed's talking about, they hadn't just taken over up there in Kansas where they got the opportunity to do so. If they've got food where they're at, they typically don't try to leave out of that. And so when we have a mass crop failure, what happens is then those hogs come out of the woods because there's no food in the woods, and they'll come into them fields, and especially during the spring when the grubs are within 2 or 3 feet of the top of the ground, them hogs can smell a grub, I bet you 4 feet deep, and they'll start rooting them grubs out of them fields and turn a hay meadow up overnight. And then I'm getting calls from these farmers saying, "Oh my God, we got hogs. We've never had hogs. Now we got hogs." Well, you had them the whole time. They just wasn't out rooting your fields up because they had a mass crop in the woods deep.
Well, I mean, it's just like Okies during the Dust Bowl and Arkies. Arkies don't get the recognition that Okies got. They're probably lucky for it. But Okies stayed in Oklahoma till the Dust Bowl hit. Then they started scattering because there was nothing to eat.
Well, I look at it like the reason we're seeing mountain lions in new places. The anti-hunters want to tell us that, and especially places like Colorado, they want to say, they're trying to tell people in Denver that the mountain lion is threatened and endangered. Well, the reason they're moving to Kansas is because the carrying capacity is full, and these young males and toms are moving out looking. So what I think is happening in South Central Indiana is landowners are keeping that population in check, so they're not expanding. They've got like you said, they've got the food, the source, the space, the arrangement, all that stuff is right there for them. So that's why they're not moving to Kansas, because you're getting after them in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, you go back the commercial hog farms, the market fell out of commercial hogs late 70s, early 80s. So you had a lot of commercial hog farms in Iowa, Nebraska in that time where literally they just threw the barn doors open and kicked them out because it was cheaper just to not feed these things than try to feed them and sell them.
I remember when that happened. Yeah.
And it always kind of like, and that was primarily the upper Midwest towards Chris. And it's kind of always perplexed me that area doesn't have the hog problem that the South has.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another thing that's happened with our hog crop, and we've not even mentioned that, is the introduction of the European hog. Okay. You look at Arkansas, when we had, for years and years and years, from the time my grandfathers both had open range hogs running in the bottoms, there's been hogs in them bottoms ever since.
It's been hogs in Arkansas since 1700s.
Yeah. We didn't have an overrunning problem, it seemed like, of hogs at that time. But what did happen was when we ended up with an influx or the European hogs being placed into Arkansas and other places. And then suddenly, hog hunting became popular because for years, those hogs lived in those bottoms and hardly anybody hunted them. There they were, and now we've got these European crossed hogs that, like I said last time, they run like a deer, fight like a grizzly bear, and climb like a mountain goat. It's a pretty cool challenge, and guys are signing on to do it. And then, say for instance, in Arkansas, South Arkansas hunting lease, many times I've had guys say, "Hey, look, we got hogs on our lease. We can go down there and work on that lease for a little while, and you kill some hogs, but they'll leave. They'll leave that hog lease or that hunt lease, and then it may be quite a while before they show back up on there because too much pressure, they move out. But then, given a little time, here they come back.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of push them around a little bit hunting, but not to say that hunting's not the best method to take these hogs, because, like Missouri has taken on. They're basically watching Arkansas and
they're just copying them, yeah,
and what their laws are, and that they just follow suit, and that's not a good plan. Arkansas has got some terrible ideas about how to deal with the hog population, and one day another administration will have to pay the high price of their terrible ideas. But nevertheless,
Well, I've written about it in the past, but so really, it's kind of a perfect storm kind of deal. So the open range closed. I mean, it closed. It's a state, even a county ordeal, but the range closed right at the exact time that Russian hogs were starting to be introduced into the wild. And it's just like I say, it's like a perfect storm. So if the range would have stayed open longer, the guys that were free ranging hogs would have weeded that wild blood out.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But it just came at the perfect time where the government tied our hands to where we couldn't weed out that Russian blood. And
what you're saying is absolutely true, because if you'd say, for instance, one of my grandfathers had a herd of hogs that they knew down in them bottoms, and suddenly some strange boar is coming in there breeding them sows, and we now have wild pigs that we ain't never had before, and the marketability for meat is not what it would have been just having a sure enough old razorback feral.
And and it was harder to catch them. And I mean, even before the introduction of Russian, so typically in the free range days, those guys who were ranging hogs, they would have a boar hog. We're talking a domestic boar hog that would breed their sows. Well, every 2 to 3 years, a hog goes feral so fast that even a domestic boar hog, every 2 to 3 years, they would go ahead and kill him and bring in a new blooded boar hog to keep everything tamped down. And we're at this point, we're talking not totally, but mostly tame hogs. So then you throw in this wild card of a Russian boar hog, and if a Russian boar hog comes into your woods, who do you think is going to breed your sows?
Oh,
your rock or this Russian?
Hey, I have seen in the woods where there has been an introduction of some Russian blood, and you may have a 250 pound Russian or European, because there's about 11 different European breeds of wild hog, but nevertheless, a sure enough wild breed of hog placed in there, and he will whip a boar twice his size and breed them sows. Okay. You'll have, if you've got a 250 pound European boar and a 400 pound Duroc, I'm sorry, your pigs are going to come up striped.
Oh yeah.
And you'll see that old big boar. He'll have some cuts on him, from that little wild boar working him over.
So I mean, really, like if the range would have closed even 20 years later than it did in most places. I don't know when Arkansas closed. Oklahoma, we closed January 1 of 1969, and we were one of the later ones. But if that would have just lasted 20 more years before they closed the range, we probably wouldn't have half the problem we have today.
Right.
We got one more comment here we need to hit before we wrap this one up. This is for you, Raymond. What are your thoughts on using Catahoula to track wounded deer for recovery?
Well, I just happen to know Seth Gravois, and he's a dandy, and he's got a dandy dog, and it just happens to be a Catahoula dog.
Is it a Plummer bred Catahoula?
I would have to say so. Now, boys, I tell you what, he's got a dog down there, and now Seth is a dog training machine. He trained waterfowl retrieving dogs and knew how to train a dog. He just never had a Catahoula dog, and like I told you on the last podcast, to call a Catahoula dog a dog is like calling a game rooster a chicken. And, both are true statements. But nevertheless, a Catahoula dog is the most cross-trainable dog breed that there is out there. And I'll argue that with the best of them. You can take your plot hounds, Chris, and you're not going to retrieve ducks with him. Okay. He can tree bears, he can tree coons, he can run something on the ground, but there's a limit to what that plot hound can do. Now,
there aren't many.
Do what now?
I said there aren't many.
Okay. Well, hey, here's the deal. Now, I won't tell you that you can put a Catahoula dog in a greyhound race and he's going to win. But what I will tell you is if you put him in that race, he's going to run with everything in him. He's going to run. He's going to run as hard as he can run. Okay.
I'm beginning to think that Raymond is kind of fond of Catahoulas.
I'm thinking the same thing.
I will tell you, boys. There's a fella down there, and he's another dandy. I mean, I know lots of good folks. There's a fella named Randall Laval down there in Louisiana, and he makes a living training blood trailing dogs. And I think Randall could even tell you that. Let me give you a little explanation here. There's a boy I sold a dog to down in the big town of Poe in Arkansas, about 200 people, and he calls me, and his pup was about 6 months old, and he calls me and he says, "Mr. Plummer," he said, it's deer season coming in. He said, "What do I need to do to teach this dog to blood trail a deer?" I said, "Put him on a string and take him out there and put him on that blood trail, and he'll find you deer." He said, "He's just a puppy." I said, "He'll do it." He took him, sent me a picture of the buck, dandy buck. I mean, a trophy buck, and that 6-month-old pup. And then so he went to blood trailing with that pup through the rest of the season, had several recoveries. Okay. And now, again, I worked my dogs against hounds many times running track. And, well, the sheriff down in the county where I was game warden had 6 bloodhounds that he had sent to and of course, bloodhounds are slow. They're like blue ticking, But he sent them down to Cummins Prison, had them trained to man track. My Catahoula dogs, every time we got a call out for a track, made them bloodhounds look so silly that he finally stole them. He said, "There's no need in me keeping all these big hounds as long as you've got them Catahoula dogs, because they can absolutely smoke them bloodhounds on the track." Well, they do the same thing on the deer track, and they can. And they know the difference. And here's a really cool thing. I blood trail with my dogs some too. And my dogs know the difference in running a deer and blood trailing a deer. Now that sounds like it's not possible, but they do. Okay.
Oh no, that's totally possible.
And so, like my old Jake dog, I could run him and do a deer recovery with him. And one time an old boy had shot a doe and he shot the end of her nose off. Well, there wasn't nothing wrong with her wheels. She just had the end of her nose shot off. She'd have died a horrible death, but meanwhile, back at the ranch, she's good to go running, And so we blood trailed her up to where she had bedded down right in where 2 hollers took off from one, and there was 3 mountains there. And that old gal jumps up and takes off running up a mountain. And old Jake looks at me like, "She just took off, Dad. What do we do now?" I said, "Get her, son." And he hawked her and got her down, but he wouldn't have if I hadn't seen him. He knew you don't just run deer. That's against the rules. But now, if I put him on a blood trail, he'll sure enough find one. He'll do it quick. Well, this old boy that had the 6-month-old pup that found the deer, the next deer season comes around, he calls me. And he says, "I'm thinking about taking this dog to a clinic, for teaching us how to blood trail." I said, "Why would you do that?" I said, "That dog's got so many recoveries now. What do you think you're going to learn, teach him at a blood trailing clinic?" He said, "Well, to be honest with you," he said, "I thought me and the boy might learn something." I said, "Well, there you go. That's a good deal." So they go. And the guy that is running the blood trailing clinic, his claim to fame was Rhodesian Ridgebacks. And this old boy told me, he said, "Now look, Plummer, there was every kind of dog there except a Catahoula dog." He said, "We had the only one. Everything from dash hounds to bloodhounds to, everything in the middle. To blood trail." And he said, "But when that guy took that, now his boy is about that big around and about 6 foot tall. He's skinny fella, the boy is. And so when the guy pulled the blood out for the scent, his dog smells it, and that boy can't hold him. And so the guy scolds the boy and says, 'Hey, son, you're going to have to hold your dog, handle your dog.' So his daddy gets him. His daddy weighs probably 230, 235. He's trying to hold the dog. He can't hold him. because he smells the blood. He's going to the blood. So the guy says, look, let me show you how to handle that dog. And now they had a runaway dog bleed, okay? And this old boy tells me, he says, now, Plummer, I guess he's not used to handling wildfire on a rope. He said, because as I handed him the lead, his feet left the ground. And it drug him straight to the deer and the blood, and it embarrassed the guy. So the guy's yanking the dog back to get him back to the owners. And he said, son, that dog's got game. So, yeah, to answer your question, Seth, absolutely, brother. Probably some of the best blood trailing dogs out there are.
Oh man, I'll tell you what. I've got a graphic here for you if I can get it up on screen. Just
you gonna give me another one?
Oh yeah, yeah. What else we got? It'd be like training a coyote to chase rabbits or catch rabbits. I'm not
Well,
sure
now, Jay, folks, I have heard tell. As a matter of fact, I saw a guy on Facebook the other day that had a coat that he had named, and he was willing to sell him out for stud fee to some of these running dogs. Said because every race he's ever been in, he come in first.
I saw that one. That was a good one. That was the best thing.
That was number 70, wasn't he?
Yeah, old number 70.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. Oh man, I gotta get this up here for you, Raymond. I think I can sum up how you feel about Catahoulas. Give me just a second here.
All right.
I think I know, but let's wait for this graphic.
Hang on a second. I got to get it up here for you.
Oh, there you go. There you go. That wraps it up pretty well. Hey, I may have to get old Ronnie Creek to make me a freeze brand like that.
Superman.
That ought to be. Yeah. That ought to just be your freeze brand from now on. Just a big red S right on the ear.
Right. Put a big OS on their chest. That'd be it. Well, boys, and Chris, I think you've done some of it, but I as well. But I've trained canine police dogs of several different breeds and kinds, and of course, been around other breeds of dogs. So I'm not mindless about other breeds. I have just absolutely, for me, I hadn't found anything that could compete with what I'm doing. So there you go. So being a competitive guy, we got to stay at the top of our game.
That's right.
So and if there's guys not being the caretaker of the breed, then we're going to lose it. And I think it's important.
And you need people that are dedicated and believe in it if you're going to do that.
Right.
I know Plot guys the same way. I know Walker guys the same way.
Right.
And in order to move these and preserve these breeds and the heritage of the breed, then we need guys like you that feel that way about them. So,
well, it's just always been a life passion with me, and like I said, if I could find, there's things in other dogs that I see that I like, like right now with the canine world, the Malinois, he's top of the game. He's hard to beat, Now, mind you, I think I could take a good Catahoula and put in there and change their minds a little bit, but we can't be all things. There you go. We can't be all things to all people. So
I mean, I guess I haven't been lucky enough to find a breed that I just care that much for.
Well, Ed, one of these days I may have to care package you a Catahoula dog, and I know that deep down you're a Catahoula man. I know that, and
I've alluded to it. I mean, they definitely have a spot, with me. I think the main thing that got me away from them was just the hard-headedness. Like my dogs were so bad for fighting. Mm-hmm. I didn't get out of them on purpose. It was one of those deals where I put too many of my eggs in a basket, and I kind of found myself out of the business on accident. And then I moved to some other breeds, and it was kind of like, oh my gosh, like I don't have to fight this fighting so bad, and it was kind of like a sigh of relief. But I like Catahoulas.
Well, we keep prospects, I call them, on the way all the time in the form of puppies, And my wife, God bless her, she's been married to a dog man nearly her whole life, and has to put up with it. But she does ask me from time to time, why do we got to have so many? And I said, honey, they're called prospects because you can be on top of your game today and have a train wreck, and the next thing you know, you're nigh out of the business. So
yeah, we did that podcast with Clue Anderson, and that's what he was talking about. He's like, you have to have, because he's a breed guy, and he's like, you have to have dogs in all stages of life.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, we do
continuously.
We
and I was pretty when I was messing with Catahoulas, I was early in my dog hunting, and I didn't quite know that, and I had a good stringer of dogs, but they were all getting older, and I didn't realize it, and I didn't have prospects coming up. And then it was one of them deals where it was like in a matter of 2 or 3 hunts and a bunch of bad luck, all my dogs were dead.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it can happen. And even if you've got a pretty good sized dog string, that can happen. It's according to what, you can run into, a bad boar hog and he can take 2 or 3 out in the lick, or hunt too close to road and get one hit on the road, or like some of these guys talking about blood trailing deer, get one gored. I had a dog that got shanked right in the heart by a 7-point, and he broke the tine off in him and shanked him effectively and walked off. So you can lose them, man, and it can happen quick. Or if you get some disease or something, whatever, you can end up in a bad way. So we try to make sure that we're not going to end up that way. Matter of fact, we've helped several kennels and hunters out of situations like that where they were, got down in a bind,
Yeah, and that's part of it. Like at that point in my life, I didn't really know that many other people. So like that's what Clue was talking about. So Clue got in the same situation, but he had placed enough dogs with people that he knew close that when he got out of the business, he could still go back. It wasn't totally starting over. He could still grab some of his blood from other dogs that he had placed.
Right. Well, again, is it a bird or a plane or a Catahoula dog?
Let's wrap it up, fellas.
Okay.
What do you think? We've been yakking for a while. We'll put that up there for Raymond one more time.
You're going to have to send that to me, Chris.
I'm going to send this picture to you for sure. Yeah. I'll send that one to you. But I appreciate it. I appreciate you jumping on there.
Forward that to old Ronnie Creek and get me a freeze brand made up. Now that would be something I could definitely stick a dog with.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Yeah, hey, look forward to getting together sometime. We'll make a big hunt and
let's do it.
And you can watch one of these old dogs go. And if I get beat by your plot dog, Chris, very bad, I've been ashamed before. So
yep.
Yeah, holler at me, Raymond. This winter we'll try to get together and hunt.
Okay. Raymond, I hunt plots, that way I never have to make excuses.
Well, I guess if you set the bar so low, you don't have to, no expectations.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I've hunted with all these guys that think they got these high-powered hounds, and when they don't perform, they're like, I ain't never seen them do that before. When it happens to me, it's like, well, what'd you expect? I brought plots.
Oh, hey, brother.
Yeah.
I tell you, they, that plot hound I had, and he was a Brandenburg bred plot, and brother, a game dog he was. We took him to White River Refuge, and old Ronnie McCullough's a coon hunter, and I mean a coon hunter. But one thing Ronnie likes to do is shock a dog. And so when he found out that I was bringing that plot down there to that coon hunt down there to White River Refuge, we go down there and camp 2 weeks out of the year in December, he said, "You are not bringing that plot." I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, that sucker's going to run deer. He's going to do all this, run bear and everything. I said, well, you're not going to get him straight by not hunting. We got to get him out there. And so there was a string of wheelers, and I was at the very back, and Ronnie shines around, and there's a herd of deer standing there, and I bet they're not 50 yards from us. And Ronnie is probably 3 or 4 wheelers up ahead of me there, and he just stops, gets off, walks back there to me. He said, "It's as good a time as any." He said, "You want to turn that plot loose?" I said, "Now look, you're trying to set him up for failure. he said, "Hey, it's going to happen, bub. He might as well turn him out now." Well, I had one of them old 10-mile trash breakers, that had the extended antenna on it, and it would curl the dog's hair. Now, I believe them old things would actually shock better than these things they got nowadays.
Oh yeah.
And so I said, "I guess so." And it had a 10-second button on it, so I pulled old Bill, old Thunder Bill. I pulled him out of the dog box, and of course he winded them deer, and he chop mouth. He just yaw 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 yaw, and Ronnie says, "Turn him loose." And when I turned him loose, brother, hey, he didn't make 2 steps, and Ronnie had fell asleep on that switch. That dog hits the ground. He's foaming at the mouth, flipping around like he's having an epileptic fit, and Ronnie smokes him for 10 seconds till that switch dies. The dog jumps up and heads to them deer again. Ronnie done it again, and he done it again, and he done it again till that plot was out of hearing. That was a hard-headed rascal, boy.
Sounds like a good dog.
Hey, left running deer, but ended up treating a bear before we went and got him.
There you go. Oh, all righty. Well, Raymond, it's always a pleasure talking to you, buddy. Never.
Hey, I enjoy it, guys.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're going to shut her down.
Y'all
See
have
you
a
next
good
week.
evening. Thank you for
Thanks,
having me
Raymond.
on. Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
We'll see y'all later.